There's a deadly virus out on the loose. You best be scared, you best be protected. So roll up your sleeves and get your ass ejected. Step right up, come and take my juice. They dropping like flies, don't you watch the news. If you don't take my juice tonight, you gonna get sick and gonna short and die. I don't mind if you big, I don't mind if you small. My juice so magic, one size fits all. Juice, another variant, another boost. Now, don't you judge my history, and I'll take no liability. Yeah, step right up, come and take my juice. I want you healthy and your children too. My juice don't kill, that's a bunch of lies. If it happens to you, I'll censor your demise. I don't mind if you big, I don't mind if you small. My juice so magic, one size fits all. I'm big farmer and I'm here for your health. I mean no harm, I just wanna help. My juice is free for you, my friend, 'cause I know you'll be back again and again and again. My juice, if you criticize, I'll silence you. No way, nobody gonna ever hear. I'm gonna make sure that you disappear. Yeah, step right up, come and take my juice. I will pay the media to terrify you. 'Cause when you scared, you in the palm of my hand. Now you'll line up, and then you'll be mad. Big, I don't mind if you small. My juice so magic, one size fits all. I'm big farmer and I'm here for your health. I mean no harm, I just wanna help. My juice is free for you, my friend, 'cause I know you'll be back again and again and again.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Knights of the Storm. Today is October 11th, 2025, and I noticed a lot of you know that guy that it was in the intro, and I did want to shout him out because I forgot to put credits on the screen. That is Conspiracy Music Guru. Very cool dude, a lot of good songs. But anyway, let's get on to it. Yeah, welcome back, and we have our lovely ladies with us today. Karen Carpenter, she's our lovely lady of liberty. Is that what we call? Yeah, I forgot. And then we got Ashley, Think, Change, Repeat, keeping us sane in an insane world. And then today, our very special guest is Zowe. She's host of Thrill Kill Medical Cult. She it's a podcast she does. She's got a couple Rumble channels we'll get to later. So you go check out her work. You were a medical coder during the COVID scandemic and became a whistleblower exposing a lot of injustice that was going on, a lot of lies. And you sometimes go on New Prisoners Network, AM Wake Up, and you're also the author, and I want to talk about the book as well, or Karen's going to talk about it because she's hosting today, The COVID Code, which is, you were telling me before the show, will soon be out on audio platform. So not just digital, but audio, and you get a hardcover as well. So website thrillkillmedicalcult.com is where you can find the books. And anyway, I'll hand it over to Karen for you to do the welcomes and stuff.
Okay. Great to see everybody this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you may be. I'm Karen, your host for today, along with Jason Barker and Ashley, Think, Change, Repeat. And it's wonderful to have Zowe with us. And we want to start off with a verse of the week, and then we'll get down into things. It's great to see you, Zowe. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Verse of the week. right, this kind of dovetails with the one we did last week, which talked about Mark of the Beast stuff. This is from Revelation 18, verse 23. It says, "And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride," bridegroom and bride, it talks about Christ and the church. Loosely, that's what it means. "Shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by their sorceries were all nations deceived." And that word sorceries, David Knight talks about this a lot, is also referred to as pharmakia in the Bible in a couple places. So pharmakia is our root word for pharmacy. So the reason I brought this up is because we're talking last week about Mark of the Beast stuff. You could slap in some digital ID, some biometrics, all that you can't buy and sell. And I believe that the mRNA technology plays a part in that. Some people say that the mRNA shot is the mark of the beast. I don't necessarily subscribe 100% to that. I think it's part of it. But one thing that we could see is that they did talk about the great merchants of the earth. And, we're talking about Pfizer, we're talking about Palantir, we're talking about all these massive corporations, these major merchants of the earth. And the word sorcery associated with that is kind of, it's a red flag to me when it comes to the new modern medicine, that maybe I just want to stay away from it as much as I possibly can. Thoughts on that, everyone?
Yes, of course, it's pharmakia, and which sorcery magic. And I always find it interesting that in the early 1900s, Rudolf Steiner's in his writings wrote that there would be an injection that would be distributed that would cut off our connection with God. And then, of course, we've had the medical lectures in the military that talk about finding the gene that's a spiritual gene, that's the connecting gene, and if I'm looking for a vaccine to tamp that down for the quote unquote religious fanatics. So I think that this has been an ongoing theme, especially in recent history. And so it's interesting that it ties in with the Bible. Zoe, would you like to comment on the verse of the week?
Not really.
Okay, that's fine. Ashley?
Yeah, I think that you have covered it pretty well. I mean, I think there's a lot of question out there about what is actually happening to us and what will be happening. And if this isn't the mark, is this leading up to that? And as I said before, I really think that time will tell where this is all going.
Okay. And my feeling is that unless you consent to something like that, they can't take something from you that you don't offer. And that's my feeling about it.
That's where I'm at. And the
Yeah.
reason I brought that is because we're seeing more and more this being excluded from society. And if you don't have your vaccine passport, if you don't have your digital ID, you don't have. So that's why I say I think a lot of it plays into it. So if you subscribe to the Bible being true, which I see a lot of stuff happening that it's in order, it pretty much warns us of all this stuff. Now, I don't know what we're going to do about that. If they say, look, you're going to have to get your digital twin, your digital ID, you're going to have to get this vaccine regiment, and God knows what else. We're gonna have to figure out how to live, how to be outside of the normal society. And we're seeing that. We saw that through COVID, didn't we? And that's another reason I brought that one up, because that happened through COVID, where people were excluded. You couldn't go to the supermarket. You can go here or there without a mask on. But anyway, I'll shut up now and back to you, Karen.
Zoe, would you give us some background on your experience through COVID and what first alerted you to the great work that you've done and all of the wonderful discoveries that you've made? And you've done some really in-depth research. So what was your experience that first started to get you questioning things?
To answer that takes a book. So this is a really long answer. I'll try and boil it down the fastest, most efficient way I can. So hi, everyone. My name is Zowe Smith. I was a medical coder during the pandemic. Most people don't know what that is. So behind the scenes, anytime you go see a doctor anywhere, even if you just go and get like a lab test done, you get like blood drawn or an x-ray done, there's going to be on the back end, there's going to be someone that's going to assign a diagnosis and procedure code. They're going to send that to insurance. And that's how your doctors and facilities, hospital facilities, clinics, whatever, get paid. So I was kind of on the behind the scenes financial side of things because I was in the realm of having to assign those codes. And then I was really aware of the programs that hospitals have to adhere to in order to get paid. Because that was kind of my game or my game, my
Mm.
it is a game of massaging numbers and figuring out, how to maximize payment without committing fraud. So you have to know like all the rules and regs and blah, blah, blah. Super boring until COVID came along. And then November 2019, they began, there was like a little banner across the screen because I worked from home. I wasn't actually physically in the hospital, but I could see the census. And our job was incredibly tied to how many patients were in the hospital. Our staffing was incredibly tied to how many patients were in the hospital. So I was keenly aware of that at all times. In fact, I could even run a census report for the hospital. And this was like a network in a major city. So it wasn't just one hospital. It was probably 5 different hospitals and then multiple other like satellite clinics and stuff that I was working for. We were like competing with the Mayo Clinic directly, if that gives you any idea, like what level care we were able to provide. So I had like a pretty good idea of what was going on in my entire city, even though I was working from home. And 2019 in November, they started saying, we're low on PPE, or masking and all that kind of stuff. And there's this Wuhan virus that's coming from China. And every year I thought, oh my God, this is just going to be another flu scare because they do it every year where they try and get their staff to get vaccinated. Well, for many years up until that point, I had been getting an exemption because I actually worked at a hospital in person for like back in early 2000s when they started pushing the flu shot on staff as a condition of hire. And I got it one of the first years that it came out, and everybody that year got sick. We even had to change our sick policy because so many people got the flu that year. They got the worst flu that they ever had, myself included, that year. And we all started saying you get the flu from the flu shot, which was a rumor, but we all started observing that for ourselves. And well, no one would really talk about it out loud. We all stopped getting the flu shot because we all kind of figured out we're getting the flu from the flu shot. And so like the following year, we didn't have the same problem because no one was doing it anymore.
Right.
So fast forward to COVID, I thought this is just going to be another scare. I've lived through the first SARS scare. I lived through the swine flu scare in the hospital, and they were non-events. They were just fear mongering by the media. So even though I wouldn't have considered myself a conspiracy theorist at that point, I was pretty suspicious that this isn't going to be what they say it's going to be. My big red flag was when I actually got a call from one of my friends who she was a pathologist. She worked at Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where Ralph Barrick still works. Key name there, Ralph Barrick, having to do with COVID. And ironically, or maybe not, she calls me up the week before the worst of it happened. And she said, go out, get food. Everything's going to shut down. You might not be able to get food if you don't go now. And when I went to the store that day, I didn't even need to go grocery shopping. I had just already gone grocery shopping, but I decided I'm going to stock up. And then I saw people wearing masks. And I knew right then, like, oh my God, people have actually drank the Kool-Aid, the fear Kool-Aid, and they really think something's going to happen. And even if I don't, everyone else is sufficiently scared. I need to be prepared. And so that was like when I don't know, red flags started going off for me. But then in April, the really big thing happened for me. And this was really early in the pandemic. So this was actually in March of 2020. So this was right when they declared 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And our hospitals were completely empty. We didn't have a single COVID patient. And then Doug Ducey, the governor of Arizona, the state I worked in at the time, declared, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. You're going to be arrested if you're not following distancing out in public. They shut down all the parks. Our hospital was sending out a notice saying, all these rules and regs have changed. There's no more visitation. We're shutting down the hospital. We're putting security at all the doors. We have to discharge a whole bunch of patients from the ICU that aren't ready to go home yet, which is normally a liability because we would have had to pay for their care if they weren't fully recovered. And if they come back to the hospital within 48 hours, then we would be financially liable for paying for their care. So that was a big red flag for us to do that and send patients home early. But we needed to make room for this wave of COVID patients that was never going to come. So that was a huge, huge, huge red flag to me. And I started telling everyone, The hospital just changed everything. There's some major issue going on here. And what they did at that time too, Medicare announced, the AMA announced, the CDC announced that there would be a new diagnosis code to track COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at the rules for that code, for how to assign that code. And I could tell right then, right in March of 2020, this whole thing is going to be a scam because of how they wrote how to assign the diagnosis code. I knew right then we're committing financial fraud by following the instructions. They're telling us to commit financial fraud by following these instructions. They're just making it look legit because they're writing instructions, but it's committing financial fraud, which goes against all the rules that we would do for everything else. And it makes it so you don't need a COVID-19 PCR test to be diagnosed. The doctor just has to look at you, which gives the physician enough of a loophole to diagnose anybody arbitrarily with this disease. So even before patients started arriving with a car accident or needing a gallbladder out or with like needing a hip replacement, and then they would do the PCR test and get the COVID-19 diagnosis. And then we start the protocols and we start treating the asymptomatic patient, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure your audience knows the downward trajectory from there. So that was really like my big red flag. And I continued to follow it through all the way up until 2021, when the vaccine started to come out. I was already wanting to quit my job and crying myself to sleep every night because of what they were doing to patients. I knew at that time that my job was to falsely label patients with COVID to get the hospital their blood money for murdering people. And I couldn't live with myself. I could not keep doing that. The only thing that kept me going was I did my research for vaccines, and I realized that this COVID-19 vaccine could be the mark of the beast. This could be the worst thing ever. I mean, I followed all of the warnings, and I hoped it wouldn't be that bad, but I knew that I would be in a position, because we were the healthcare workers, we were the front line, we were the ones who had to get the vaccine first to be an example for the rest of society. And anyone who had injuries would be coming to the hospital, and I would be seeing those injuries. So I did my research and I prepared, and I thought, I'm going to act as a spy. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to wait, and I'm going to see if it really is as bad as they say. And we were so behind in our coding because they had laid everyone off. So the healthcare heroes that were supposedly going to the hospital to save everyone from dying of COVID, that didn't happen. We were getting laid off. We were getting furloughed. They were reducing staff. They were consolidating down the hospital, and we were going into the red, and we would not have made it. The hospitals would have gone bankrupt all across the nation very quickly within that first month of March, had we not had the CARES Act and the incentive money for doing all the protocols and everything that they did. So when the vaccines came out, it was a good probably 2 months until I actually started seeing those cases. And I think that was deliberate, so people could keep getting the shots without knowing that there's a danger signal.
Why do you think, okay, I listened to several of your interviews in the last week or so. Why do you think there was that lag in the injuries showing up or getting the cases from the vaccine injury?
Well, first of all, no one in the medical field did the research that I did, so they didn't even recognize that it was a vaccine injury when it was one. That's universal. They don't teach you about what a vaccine could do. You have to figure that out for yourself. So the doctors would just say, if someone comes in having a heart attack, oh, you're having a heart attack, we'll treat you for a heart attack. They wouldn't even ask if the patient had a vaccine. And it wouldn't be documented. I'd have to dig through the chart and hope that the patient happened to say something to somebody, and then they actually took a second to write down, oh, the patient had Moderna on X and X date. So that was pretty rare, and there was no code to actually track that. So I think it was a combination of, we had reduced staff across the board, which made it so everyone's workload was a lot higher. And then people don't really pay attention as much to like detailed attention to their work when you're overworked. You just try and get through it as fast as possible. So I think that was kind of another way to make it so we wouldn't look or we wouldn't pay attention. And then it was the first phase of the rollout. So it was only like EMTs, police, healthcare workers in that first phase that were able to get it. And it wasn't until maybe 3 or 4 months later that they started releasing it to like, because I think there was two like initial phase 1, and it was first the healthcare workers and the police, the ambulance, ER, those kinds of frontline workers. Like I wasn't even qualified in that first, even though I worked for a hospital, I wasn't in the ER. I wasn't seeing patients face to face. So I wasn't prioritized as one of the first. But if you were an EMT, you worked in the ER, you were one of the first. And then they made it available to people in nursing homes. And I wouldn't see those because they were just letting them die in the nursing homes. They weren't transferring to the hospital when they had a problem. They were just letting them die there, filling out DNR forms and saying, okay, well, we're not going to take them to the hospital, because that's part of it when you sign a DNR, that they won't call 911 and they won't send you emergency care.
Yeah, we have an EMT handy who works, he's worked throughout the pandemic in the Atlanta area, and he talks about not being authorized to respond to heart attacks, not being authorized to treat those types of people in their homes. And also he's lost several of his coworkers to vaccine injuries, strokes, heart attacks. And of course, these are young, healthy people. I want to get to the point where we talk about Tiberius and the surveillance system, how it works back up to the WHO, and also the coding, the lack of code for vaccine injury. And if you feel, looking back in your career, if there was always an effort to hide vaccine injuries in children, or flu vaccine injuries, etc., through the coding process. And then
can I address a couple comments that, since you brought up Handy, he's left some good comments in here. If I could throw, I know you're full screen, so you can't see it, Karen.
Well, I can see I'm reading the chat.
Okay, cool. Yeah, he had mentioned first off on that massive flu that everyone got sick after the flu shot. He says he had a friend working in that same area that the exact same thing happened. So, and as time has gone on, my perception is, I'm not going to say that there's a virus or not a virus. I don't know. I'm not a virologist, right? But Karen and I did some extensive reporting on, it looks like the vaccines are what causes the illness. There's other contributing factors like the increasing amount of EMF we're exposed to, because if you look at the symptoms of overexposure to EMF, it's quite similar. And then we see the rising cases of autism, and both the vaccines and EMF causes oxidative stress in the brain, which is what they attribute to people with dementia and autism. So I think Karen and I were talking the other day, there's multiple factors. I definitely think that when it comes to autism and early onset dementia and things like that, those adjuvants play a role, but I think there's more to it than that. And that's a plausible deniability thing, because one's going to blame the other, right?
You're way jumping the gun, Jason.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, but let me get to the comments.
The terrain versus virus theory. I mean, all of those points are valid, and we've covered those in shows, but I just wanted to talk more about the system and what she noticed about it. But but there are studies that show that people who get flu shots are more likely to develop quote unquote flu-like illnesses. And
there absolutely are. I actually cover that in my book, that they've done studies and found that you're more likely to get the flu, or you're more likely to get whatever disease you're being vaccinated against, because you got that vaccine, flu specifically. And interestingly, and this is something I cover in the book, is it might not be like when you get the flu, it might not be the same season that you get the flu shot in. It might be the following season.
That's interesting.
And we're not taught to think that if you get a flu like in 2024 and you didn't get the shot in 2024, that means that you should have got the shot and then you wouldn't have got sick. So you go and get the shot in 2025 and you get sick in 2026. You'd be like, oh, well, the year I didn't get the shot is the year that I get sick. Not ever knowing that it could have a really long lasting effect, like even a year down the road.
Right. And that would be why the lab animals, for example, there haven't been mRNA vaccines successfully treating the corona quote unquote viruses, because when the animals were re-exposed to the antigen in the vaccine, or to the pathogen in the vaccine, the animals all developed a cytokine storm and died. So that's the latent exposure to what you're vaccinated for. My dad died in 2018, October of 2018, and I'm convinced that he died of sepsis and other after effects of a flu shot and a pneumonia shot. And he died in the same hospital system where I'm sure you've heard that there have been some court cases filed for wrongful death in the Fresno, California area. 3 hospitals have had, and that's also the same area. This is the same area where the nurse whistleblower has exposed the.
I'm an expert witness on that case, and I'm not at liberty to talk about that case right now.
I'm just saying that's where the hospital on the floor where my daughter was born.
Wow.
30 years ago. But this is all happening in my area. And I know you're doing a vigil, and I really want to talk about that. But the community here is really fairly active, considering we live in California, and we see the big banners are rolled out at the noontime hour in front of the hospitals with the pictures of and the names of people who died in those particular hospitals. When you drive by, my husband sees them during the day in his commute. So I just thought maybe you're aware of those cases, and also it's just great to see people like you and these people who lost loved ones just sticking with getting the word out there.
Yeah, well, that's really what my experience called me to do, is that, I mean, this all happened behind closed doors, and no one gets to talk about it. It's been silenced, it's been censored, it's been downregulated, it's socially unacceptable to mention it even to your family. Like, I have a family member that died suddenly, and nobody in the family is allowed to question why that is. And no one wants to cause any more pain to her parents. She was 17. That's a traumatic event to lose a child at that age.
Yes.
So there's a whole lot of factors why it's been really like brushed under the rug. And another reason why I wanted to do the vigil is that there's so much infighting in the medical freedom community, whether there's viruses or not, or is it the PCR test, or was it really a pandemic? There's all these like controversial issues that people can argue about and nitpick over. And then it sends us into our own individual echo chambers where we can't work together. And I want to find that banner where we can unite together and remember like why we're really still doing this. And that's what keeps me going. This was our family that was offered up as cannon fodder for somebody else's agenda. And that is not okay. And the system has not changed in a way that it can't happen again. And I will not rest until I can do something, anything that will put the system in a state where they cannot exploit us like lab rats anymore.
At least to the best of our ability. So I want to tie in the Tiberius, the HHS Protect, those type of things, but let's let Ashley have a chance to ask you a question. I know she's well versed on these issues too, and chomping at the bit.
Thank you very much. I have very much enjoyed the conversation so far, and I wanted to roll it back just a little bit. So in these early days of COVID, and you were saying that doctors were allowed to just look at you and say you have COVID. So we know that there was the financial incentive, which you've already touched on, for them to do that. But was that a policy change, or were they able to do that leading into even in cold and flu season? You're coming in, I just think you have the flu. Like, were they
that
already
was a policy change?
Okay.
That was when the CDC, the AMA, they worked together to create the ICD codes. And the WHO owns the ICD codes, but each member state has to use them in all of their institutions for any hospital, clinic thing that happens. And then that data is collected internationally for statistical reporting purposes. So they needed a way to track the disease. And when they created the diagnosis code, it stated right in the announcement, this goes against coding guidelines. This is an exception to the rule. The only exceptions that they had for that, which were never invoked before, was HIV and Zika, 2 diseases that I knew Fauci had been researching at the NIH. And I found that even though I didn't know anything about Fauci, the book The Fauci book had not come out yet. I just thought that's really suspicious. Why is it HIV, which is highly, highly tracked? There's a registry where we have to send, we're required as an institution to send data on HIV patients and AIDS positive patients, just like we're required to send data for communicable diseases like cancer, or just things that the WHO and CDC, any regulatory agency would want to collect. Sometimes there's a law that says if you see a patient that has one of these diseases, you have to report it. And usually that information is de-identified. But along with the COVID-19 diagnosis that broke all the rules, that it straight up said, Section 2H, all a physician has to do is look at you and document in their medical opinion that you have this disease. That is not true for flu. So they could never do that for flu. But what was interesting about flu is they didn't need a test to prove you had the flu. There was no asymptomatic flu. You walked in, you had flu symptoms, you had a runny nose, you're running a fever, what we all know what flu symptoms are. And that's all the physician had to do, say, well, these are the symptoms. We can document the symptoms. And they would write it in, there's like a ROS, which is like a body system. They run through all the body systems and say like whatever your symptoms are. And then at the end, they would say, well, I'm diagnosing you with flu. So they weren't just like looking at you. They had to do the exam and they had to document why they thought you had the flu. And usually the patient would come in and say, I have the flu. But there was never a test to confirm that they had the flu. At least it wasn't done routinely. So when I worked in a university hospital, this is a level 1 trauma center. I think there were like 14 floors of that hospital, probably 600 beds. They had a medical school. When patients would come in with the flu, they still would not do this test, but it was called the rapid flu test. And I remember working in the lab, you had to get this. It was like a stat test. So you had to get it within 15 minutes because the specimen would expire unless you ran the test within 15 minutes. That's why it's called rapid flu, because the specimen will expire. And it was a nose swab. Now, it did not have to go all the way up to your brain. They could just do a saliva wipe inside your mouth and send it, and that would be acceptable. Or they could take a little wipe inside your nostril and send it. And it just had to be done within 15 minutes. This was also like a precursor to PCR. It didn't have like the whole repetition cycle, but it was essentially the same process. And it was only done to confirm what kind of flu a patient had, if a patient had flu and came back to the hospital repeatedly because they weren't getting better. And that test was done to see, should we give this patient Tamiflu? Should we give them some other kind of antibiotic? It was only done to try and see, is the treatment working and how can we change the treatment to make it work better? So it wasn't a universal, everybody got this test the second you walk in the hospital kind of a thing. But with COVID, it was now everybody has to take the test, which we had never done that for any test before. So COVID changed everything about how the hospital treated communicable disease, even quarantine. It changed everything.
It changed the data that was reported. HIPAA is actually a sharing agreement. It's not really about privacy, which people tend to think.
It's about portability. That one of the P's is for privacy, but it's also for portability. So it's actually for information sharing, not for privacy.
So my understanding is that, and also just on the topic of AIDS and Fauci, that's a great story everybody needs to look into. And of course, RFK Jr. did a great job of discussing that in his The Real Anthony Fauci, which I actually bought 10 copies of and distributed for Christmas the year it came out.
I've actually done a 4-series thing with David Rasnick, who knew Carrie Mullis, who created the PCR, and we cover that in depth. It's called From AIDS to COVID-19 84 is the main one. So I urge people to go check that out on my Rumble channel, that it will change your perspective on AIDS and STDs and maybe all pandemic-like diseases even.
Right. There's a movie called The Dallas Buyers Club, which is also about the AZT and the way that, and I find it interesting that there are people now that were diagnosed with AIDS, decades ago, and they're perfectly fine. Singing, music entertainers and things. But then you had people like Arthur Ashe, a tennis player, dying very rapidly and just wasting away. And so that's a really interesting story. And so I wanted to talk about the data, the way that our data was unmasked, and how it ties into this whole global surveillance system and the WHO.
I was just touching on that when I
Yeah.
talked about the registry for AIDS. So like I was saying, one of the things that they'll mandate any hospital, organization, any clinic to do is report certain diseases. Well, when the COVID-19 diagnosis came out, a COVID-19 registry also came out. Now that registry exists to today, but it's gone underground and been new names and gone under, like, I think it's become privatized instead of public. But at first it was a partnership between LabCorp, which is a laboratory send out service that a lot of hospitals nationally are actually outsourcing their internal labs to. So because hospitals now it takes so much technology and it's expensive that labs no longer make hospitals money. Labs cost hospitals money. So hospitals don't like that. So now they're outsourcing, and one of the main ones that they're outsourcing to is LabCorp. And you'll probably see cars driving around your own little town that say LabCorp on them, the same LabCorp. And a company called Ciox, which was a data aggregation company. Now, Ciox got bought out by another company, and I cover that in one of my specials. I forget. I think it's called the COVID code U07.1. And in that, I detail how all of this happened. So high level view is basically when there is a registry, the information is supposed to be de-identified. So like for an AIDS registry, if you were in contact with somebody else, those contacts would not be part of the registry. They would only take that patient's information, whether you were HIV positive or not, whatever your AIDS markers were, any other clinical markers that they want to put out there, but your name, your age, your ethnicity, like any personal information about you would be stripped before it was sent to the database. So it would be a de-identified, like you can't re-identify a person in theory in these registries. But the whole point of the COVID-19 one was to collect not only the patient name, email, phone number, all of your personal identifiers, but that of all of your contacts. And you were asked to give it up voluntarily. And this was such a major endeavor to do. And it's so different from what we had done before that they actually had to bring in social workers to the hospital at first to fulfill this role. And then they had a whole bunch of volunteers because everyone was on furlough. And so everyone wanted to help and hope that they might get paid. So they had a whole bunch of help at first. And then they realized, oh my God, we're not going to be able to do all of this. We can't keep up with it. We're going to have to put this into a registry. We're going to have to use AI. So they set it up to where the information would have to automatically be sent. This kind of evolved underground. So when you hear about contact tracing, like contact tracing was being done to all of us. And then eventually it went out on your phone. Mm-hmm. And there was like an app on Google and Apple phones. I have a privacy phone, so I don't have that. But it had like a little notification that, oh, you got too close to somebody. We're going to have to count that as a contact. Yeah. It was kind of that, but also incorporating all of your medical information and location data with that, and then sending it to a registry. In addition to that, so another layer of that, about 6 months into the pandemic or so, I hear my bosses talking about there's this data feed that was broken. Like IT needed to fix this data feed. And if this data feed did not send the data by end of day that day, then we were going to lose a lot of money. There was a huge financial incentive there. I didn't know what it was, but then I read up Whitney Webb's Unlimited Hangout article, and she covers a lot on the healthcare panopticon and Palantir and Total Information Awareness, which was a private company, which it was actually a public company that then became privatized. So I call it the public-private partnership virus.
Right.
And so ultimately, HHS and CDC came up with a partnership. They mandated that hospitals had to send ventilator data, how many ventilators we had, how many COVID patients we had, how much remdesivir we had, what our vaccination levels were, what our case mix was, all of this information. And there were congressmen all over the country. There's probably 22 different states that were like, this is a massive amount of data. We shouldn't have to share this. And even hospitals who are normally universally compliant never pushed back about anything like that at all. They didn't push back about the COVID registry. But when HHS said, you need to do this HHS Protect program, which is sending us all of your data every night in a feed. If you don't share that data, then we can't pay you. This was Medicare saying Medicare wouldn't pay the hospital. Now that would bankrupt a hospital. So that's why they were sweating bullets needing that feed. And when I realized, oh my God, this is a massive amount of data that is breaking HIPAA in every way, shape, and form. They even had to change HIPAA just to be able to do this. And to have that amount of pushback from congressmen and the healthcare field universally is unheard of. Yeah. I mean, I hate to use the word unprecedented, but it really was unprecedented to collect that amount of data on Americans. And then I come to find out that it is the Palantir program that they're using for HHS Protect. And what's interesting is there's two different programs. Now, Palantir has multiple programs for healthcare management. They call them dashboards. And they're basically ways that they're like central intelligence for the hospital. You can see the census. You can see how many nursing staff you have. You can see how many drugs you have. Everything in real time is all centralized right there. And you can touch a button and change your staffing levels or change your pharmacy or order vaccines or change how many ventilators, whatever you want to do. So there's programs to monitor all of that Palantir provides to hospitals. And hospitals already use this as just a general tool to manage their business. So it wasn't any big deal for them to take a Palantir program called, I think for under Operation Warp Speed, the HHS Protect program was part of that. And Palantir created a program called Tiberius. Tiberius was a program that used the data that they collected from HHS Protect, that they collected from the COVID-19 registry. It could predict behavior. So it had your ethnicity data, it had your location data, it had your behavioral data, it had your medical record information. It knew if you were vaccinated or not, even though there wasn't a code to track that publicly. But Palantir had a way to do that. CDC had a way to do that. HHS had a way to do that. Us in the hospital, we did not have a way to do that. We were blinded. Okay. But it assigned a risk score to people. And that's how they determined, and to hospitals too. And that's how they determined, by using this Tiberius program, where do they send the vaccines? Where do they send the ventilators? And where do they send the remdesivir?
I'm curious. You talk about it. You tie it with the kill drones and the use in Gaza, Lavender. It seems like that would be just a different name, probably for a very similar iteration of that program. We had Grace Shara, which I'm sure you followed the story of Grace Shara eventually being murdered in the hospital. At some point, did Tiberius give the green light that this girl, it's time for her to go? Was it that deliberate?
I don't know for sure, but I highly suspect yes. And there's another case that's going to court this week. It didn't get any press, but it was far worse than Grace Shara. I can guarantee you that. They murdered this poor girl over 40 days in the hospital. Oh. She had mental disabilities and she was of mixed ethnicity. So she checked all the boxes. And she was she had a fund to care for her because she was a special needs adult. So there was a fund with a substantial amount in it set aside for her care. And her mother is not able to use that money to get justice for the death of her daughter.
Wow.
So I think Gray Shara may have fallen into that, and I believe that this other patient may have fallen into that because the mental disabilities right there, and then there was a financial incentive because that money went back to the state.
Yeah, it seemed that there was an algorithm, the inability to use off-label medications. You had doctors who were fighting to, for example, Dr. Paul Merrick was fighting to use different protocols, the tried and true protocols that he had always used, say, for example, for sepsis and those types of things. There was a lot less doctor judgment involved. And having been a teacher, and you've got schools now using these dashboards, similar to what you were talking about with Palantir for hospitals, the schools are moving toward that same thing too. And of course, we saw everything go more online. Everybody became much more comfortable, or a lot of people. The idea was to move us into being much more comfortable online and sharing so much of our data and our information, and our being in isolation and working online and being more comfortable with all these restrictions and invasions of our privacy. Jason,
I totally agree. I wanted to touch on your
okay.
question about how Tiberius and the other program might come together for the drone thing. So what I covered on the Corbett report. So
Which
I
was
did a
excellent.
2-part series called Medical Surveillance, and it talks about AI in the medical records programs, and how that builds to partnering with Tiberius, and how the medical records programs are already partners with Palantir, and that data feed goes back and forth. So even if you don't have a Palantir labeled program in your medical records system, almost all of the medical records providers, EMR, electronic medical record providers, Epic, Cerner, are partners with Palantir. So that information is already being shared with Palantir, even before we even start to talk about the Tiberius system that assigned people a threat risk score. So they actually need 2 programs to carry out an action, or to take action against so like if they assign you a threat risk score, they think you're high enough risk and they're going to do something about it, then they need another program to execute the action, right? So if you go to Palantir's website, they have a program called Gotham. They also market Gotham for hospital use, so right along with Tiberius. Something to know about these programs, about AI programs, or a lot of electronic medical records programs, Epic in particular. I was an Epic trainer. I worked at a hospital while we were implementing Epic. So I'm familiar with the build and how you can customize it and everything. And between different hospitals, Epic could even be called something else. You can just change the name of the program. Program will still do what it's going to do, but you can change the name of the program. So the program Gotham doesn't need to be called Gotham. It could be called Lavender. Still does the same thing. But the point of Gotham, what that program actually does is execute the target, or it has an algorithm that will assign whatever it's supposed to do. And then if it's it's supposed to send out a drone to a target in Gaza, that is what Gotham is designed to do. If you go to the Palantir website, it explains that once Tiberius flags a threat risk, then it sends it to the next program for the actionable part. So that's what Gotham is designed to do. It makes the decision to kill or not to kill, and it sends out the order basically to do it. So if it's a drone, it sends out the drone. And that is what's happening in Gaza. There's, I believe I forget the name of the article, but it's cited in my medical surveillance thing. I think it's, I forget the name of it, something 911. And they talked to the military in Gaza. They talked to the IDF, and they found out that they were using a program called Lavender, but it also had 2 parts. It had a part analogous to Tiberius that assigned people in Gaza a threat risk. And basically that was just, they were looking for, I believe it was called Where's Daddy is one of the programs. And it was looking for what they thought was Hamas, but all the criteria it needed was a male voice, and they weren't even looking for the person to be alone. They would triangulate phone numbers, and some of the military had said that they know that people in the area will change phone numbers or change phones because everything's so crazy there. People will lose phones, or their phone will blow up, they'll lose it, and they need a new one, and so they'll trade with other people. Well, if they traded with the wrong person, that gets you put on a kill list.
Yes.
And so a lot of innocent women and children were killed because these drones they're not I guess programmed to try and isolate the person when they're alone. And then the ones that were being told that were running this Gotham program, essentially, which may have been called a different name. It may have been called Lavender. It may have been called Where's Daddy. I heard a couple other program names. But essentially, that's their criteria was just, do you hear a male voice? If not, go ahead and send the drone. So it takes out the decision making, and it takes the human factor away. So now you're just playing a computer game. Now you're just playing World of Warcraft or something. And, there's no actual bloodshed or anything that you have to feel guilty about as the soldier. Like, maybe you can speak to that, Jason, but I think that was kind of the goal, was to create some distance there.
Absolutely, to take the human factor out. I agree.
I sat through it was a secret briefing. I can't really talk about it because I don't know if it's been declassified, but we sat through a brief. They just wanted some bodies and chairs, so for this colonel to feel important. And he was talking about this Army of 2030 stuff. This is before I got out. And they were talking about drone swarms and domains and dominating domains and stuff like that. And one of the key points that he brought up was whether or not, he asked the question whether or not we should go to the drone making its own kill decision, if you will. And I was the only one to stand up and say no. I think it's a bad idea. There should be somebody in the back end. And he really pushed, and I got in a lot of trouble from my higher ups because they're like, just nod your head and say yes because it's a colonel, right? I'm like, no, but it's insane. They even talked in the briefing about how they might mistake a kid holding a broom as having an AK. And besides, those nations, you're allowed to walk around with an AK. Why is that person necessarily a threat? But yeah, I wanted to reach back on something. You caught my attention when you talked about Palantir and public-private partnerships. I want people to understand public-private partnerships are a way to hide what's going on. That's the reason they do it. We'll take NASA, for example. NASA, we could do, freedom of information requests to find out where the money's going. Now we use SpaceX, and you can't do that because they're a private company. The same is going on with Palantir. All that medical information is being pushed there, likely all your financial information. And then you touched into the behavioral intelligence, what I thought was really cool, because I've been researching that all week. So I didn't know that was going to come up. And I put that on screen for a second. This is an article from 2020. So right about the time COVID came out, right? This is a company, they may have since moved to Palantir. I don't know. It's called Coesis Creative Group. And I'll just read it. I won't put it back on screen. This is how they define behavioral intelligence. It's the application of skills and abilities to accurately explain existing behaviors, predict future behaviors, influence other people's behaviors, and control your own behavior. And they mentioned the word epic, right? I guess that was the program they started off. So this is very important to understand that through using, as you mentioned, public-private partnerships, they're coagulating all this data that we don't know what they're doing with. But going back to the mark of the beast stuff, everything's there. Where you can move, where you can travel, when your bank account gets turned off, if you're injected or not. Andy says in the chat, he was saying, he had a lot of comments. I wish I could have read them all, but he was saying that he's witnessed that they'll ask you if you're vaccinated, and it doesn't matter how you answer, they know either way. So it's kind of like identifying people who would lie about it. Anyway, that's all I had. I just really appreciate that you touched on the anticipatory and behavioral intelligence and the public-private partnerships, because that's the big red flag for me. And there's no way
those
for
are
us
the
to
major threats. I think that we're getting to a place of pre-crime where they can just say, oh, you didn't get a vaccine, now you're a threat to national security, because the vaccine stuff is part of I think it's National Security Federation or something. It's even over HHS. All of the vaccine passport stuff, digital ID, you look in the fine print and it also says you are a threat to national security if you do not comply with certain public health mandates or public health regulations or whatever. And the vaccination is part of it. So it hasn't gone away. They just stopped calling it vaccine passports and started calling it digital ID. But that vaccine part is still there, and you're still a threat to national security if you don't get their death shot. And I think they can just decide that you're a dangerous person because you didn't follow, the correct group think, and then they can punish you accordingly. Ashley?
So I just wanted to get your thoughts on, if we're coming up with this behavioral model or this like behavioral score, and that's something that we have all thought was coming. We thought that it would be tied into the social credit score and certainly tied with our behavior and how compliant you are. But what has been surprising to me is that really is already there, right? With what you're saying. So where were they getting the other metrics for your behavioral score, for your risk assessment? Because we know that your acceptance or denial or refusal to take the vaccine or whatever that history and maybe some of your other medical history, they could extrapolate. But what else were they looking at, and how did they get that information?
Oh, it's really, really, really nefarious. They even have a whole nother incentivized program called Social Determinants of Health. So they're trying to take every bit of information, where you live, if you live in an apartment, if you live in a group living setting, what kind of car you have, if you take public transportation, what's your ethnicity, what's your mental health like, have you ever been diagnosed with a personality disorder or depression or anything along those lines. And they're going to use all of that for your behavioral social credit score too. So it's been in the works for a really long time. I only became aware of it when the contact tracing thing was around, because I noticed they were changing HIPAA laws to enable more sharing. And then I noticed that the AI was there. And when I looked at Epic and Palantir Partners, there is a diagram. I wish I could find it super quick, but it'd probably take me a few minutes to find it. They're getting the information from everywhere. There's partners that are in every financial sector. There's partners in every tech sector. So your credit report is part of it. Your banking report is part of it. Your every institution, so like the Bureau of National Statistics, the Census Bureau, all of that information is part of it. Plus everything in your health information. I mean, it is incredible. I don't think I can think of a company that isn't somehow involved in collecting and aggregating our data in some way. It's every sector. It's not just healthcare. It's every sector.
Does this include social media? Do they have that access to that yet?
Yes. They are also partners. Yeah.
That's terrible.
I know. And this is why I tell people, don't put everything out online. You are giving them the keys to the kingdom. Because when I was working in Epic, my job was to figure out how the AI was auto-predicting codes. So it would go through, it would use machine learning, it would use natural language processing to come up with whatever diagnosis code it thought you had based on the documentation. And it was my job to correct the AI if it was wrong and figure out what kinds of things it wasn't good at collecting, and then teach it how to do it better. And the more I taught it how to do it better, the more I taught my staff how to correct the AI to do it better, the more our jobs went away, because AI got much, much better at doing it. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, that's interesting you brought that up. We actually just had an email come in with a recommendation for a guest, and I went and looked up what the guest does. Yeah, Karen knows about it, and
It's a
Ashley knows about
trap.
it. It's a trap. It's a trap. Anyway, this is what's interesting. We talk about data collection, and you're talking about systems where they're sharing from doctors and stuff, or sharing and getting all this information together, and AI sifts through it. Well, this company that this guy, he's a CEO of, that was recommended, for us to ask to come on the show. He has a company based out of Canada that they're making devices that you can basically it's triaging yourself and diagnosing and stuff like that. So even without, if you get away from your doctor sharing information, if you go with these devices, they're going to get information that goes over the web, and they're going to collect that data. So be very careful. I recently put my smartwatch back on just because I wanted to see. I don't usually use it, but this thing, and I noticed that when the time was off because it has been dead for so long, and I went to sync it with my phone. Now, this is something new with this Fitbit. My location and sharing stuff has to be turned on 24/7, running in the background for my watch to show the right time. So it doesn't do what a basic function of a watch does. What it wants is it wants my phone connected, my watch in close proximity, and somebody's collecting where my heart rate is, my O2 levels, how much exercise I'm getting. And if you think that won't be used against you when you file a claim saying, oh, it says that you don't smoke when you filled out your insurance policy. However, our data anticipated that you probably smoke based off of your heart rate going up and things like O2 levels changing. So that's what they really want it for. And the electronic devices, and even RFK said that in 4 years, we're all going to be wearing wearables. That information.
Yeah. Where do you think the wearable information is going to go? Straight
Exactly.
to
Right.
Palantir. And then they're going to use that to give you a threat risk score. And we're going to be in pre-crime territory where they're going to be like, oh, you've committed a thought crime. Your blood pressure just went up. You're holding a stick, which looks like an AK. Okay, time to send the drone. I mean, we're really in that category. I mean, you and I were talking about ICE on a different show last week. We know they use Palantir. We've seen the overreach of ICE. And just in the last 2 weeks, I've seen drones in my neighborhood. And I found someone who has written that the Portland police, and I know they just sent the feds there. Guess what? The Portland police have drones, and it is a predictive policing program.
Right.
And already people have been not committing crimes, but had a firearm in their car. And the drone is sent out because they're a suspicious person. So they haven't committed any crime. No one's complained about them. They haven't done anything wrong. That does not make you a criminal if there's no injured party and no crime committed. However, if someone looks at you funny, they can now say, oh, well, you were going to commit a crime because you had a dangerous weapon. And they go ahead and send out the drone, and they justify it as it's better to send the drone than it is to send an officer and put an officer in harm's way.
Right. Several things I wanted to tie in here. First of all, at the beginning of COVID, when Trump was declaring the situation, he did declare several public-private partnerships, and those were the stores that were allowed to stay open. I remember it very clearly. Walgreens, CVS, Costco, Lowe's, Home Depot, I think even Harbor Freight, so there were certain chain stores that were declared public-private partnerships, and those were the ones that had preferred status and got to stay open. The next thing is the cars, auto data. Cars are surveilling us much more than most of us realize, and even some cars are in their literature as the ability potentially to be able to gather DNA data. I don't know how cars are going to do that, but we have a fairly new car, which I didn't want to do, but our old cars just completely all took a dump at once. So we had to get a car that worked, and I was shocked that I swerved to miss something and it flashed, you need to take a break.
I was test driving a car recently, and I had the exact same experience. It was a Subaru with the eyesight on it, and I was trying to find one without all the tech, same as you. So I'm on this test drive, and there's some construction to the left. So I look to the left, and the car is beeping at me, and it says, keep your eyes on the road.
Yes.
And I'm like, how does it know where
Yes.
I'm looking? And the sales guy goes, oh, if you don't scan your face into the thing, then it's going to keep giving you suggestions like that. And it's watching you. It has a camera that has a thing watching you. And the more it learns your face, the better suggestions it gives. And I went, can I turn that off? And he's like, why would you want to turn that off? I go, I feel like I've been violated just by sitting in this car. You should pay me for going on this, for collecting my information. Delete whatever you have from there. And he was like, but it's for your safety though. And then I about lost it.
Yeah. And then, of course, it wants to pair with your phone, which I absolutely will not allow it to do. So I've just used the AM or FM radio, and I've had this car for over a year now, and I've never used any of the features that are available by pairing with a phone. I just won't allow it to do so, but I'm sure it's still getting plenty of data. I wanted to ask you about the DNA gathering during COVID with the PCR tests, and also how you see Doge tying into this, with Elon going in with his tech associates and accessing all of the federal databases, possibly even our health information. What do you see as happening with Doge? What's your hunch about that, or information that you have? And then Handy in the chat, our EMT, he says, this has been great. You've really been answering a lot of questions he's had, because he's been very carefully observing and documenting, and he also has a Substack. So apparently you've been very helpful for him. So he wanted to express his appreciation.
Well, I'm glad. That's awesome. What was the first part? The DNA on the PCR test. Okay. So back when I worked in a university lab, we had a brand new toy called PCR testing. We couldn't do it at the lab that I worked at, so we had to send it out. It was a send out. And all the techs were talking about, this was like early 2000s, and Mullis came up with it and like released it in early 80s. So this was like within the first 10 years of the technology even being out. And all of the tests were for genetic samples. So they were, if you were going to be a parent, you could get genetic testing, and you could see if you had the likelihood of having a baby with Huntington's or Down syndrome or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then you could determine if you wanted to continue with the pregnancy or not based on your results. So it was called basically pre-family planning kind of genetic screens. And then the other one was cancer. So if you were a patient, this primarily happened with breast cancer, but there were some other cancers, usually reproductive ones, where like usually a elderly member of the family would be diagnosed with some devastating rare genetic kind of cancer. And then their family members, their younger family members. So I'm sure Angelina Jolie is probably one of those people, because she had the BCRA gene. And so she got her breast taken care of before she got breast cancer. It's that sort of a thing. So they do a PCR test, and it will tell you if you have BCRA or whatever other, likelihood that you might get cancer. And that's what the PCR was used for. There was no virus testing at all at that time. So fast forward to, and I worked in a lab for 6 to 8 years, somewhere in there, for a pretty long time. So I was pretty familiar at different university labs what PCR could be used for. And it was almost all genetic stuff until I became a coder. And then I was a coder for 10 years, and I wasn't really paying attention to, I was looking at lab results every day for my job, but I wasn't really concerned about if it was by PCR or not. I just noticed in 2020, when we were doing this COVID testing, I had to, as a function of my job, double check the test result and see if the patient really is positive before I assign that diagnosis code. And I was really meticulous about this, because I really didn't want to be diagnosing people with COVID that didn't have it. And I knew there's a whole bunch of people that I had to diagnose or assign the code, because the doctor's telling me to do that. And I can't question the doctor as part of my job. But there were ones that were pretty cut and dry. But anyway, as that, I think I'm getting off track here.
How the DNA testing ties in with the databases, et cetera.
So then I learned, as I'm checking these test results for positive or negative, that they're done by PCR. And I thought, we've never done viruses by PCR. Why are we using PCR testing for this? That doesn't make sense. And then I started hearing, and that's around the time that I started hearing rumors in the dog park, just walking around, because I never did the whole lockdown, stay distance. I was still going out and talking to people, and I was finding out that everyone was complaining about hearing about these false positives. And even Elon Musk was on X saying, I had one negative test and then one positive test. This test can't work if it's like that. And that's what made me look into it a little bit further. And I could not find the psychothreshold. People were talking about the psychothreshold. I saw Derek Brose's special. I really need to talk to Derek Brose, because it is not all about the false positive. There's one thing that I leave you here with today. What I want to leave you here with is the PCR test does not work at all. And any science that cites the PCR test, even if it's saying pregnant women tested positive for spike protein, if it's done by PCR, I want to remind you what Kerry Muller said about PCR. He said it can find anything in anybody. It does not mean that the thing that we found is the thing that causes disease.
Right.
So just because you have a spike protein in your body does not mean your body is manufacturing spike all the time. It does not mean you are vaccinated and you have the spike from that. It does not mean anything other than they found one little molecule of one little thing.
Right.
So there's a lot of science out there that should be brought under question, because it is all resting on this foundation of PCR testing. Then when I started looking into it a little bit further, I was like, well, okay, there's a lot of variables that could be going wrong here. It could be the psychothreshold. It could be the reagents, the control of the actual test. Maybe the control is designed to be positive or negative for a certain percentage of people, and we don't have a way to individually verify that, because all of the independent parts of the test are all under EUA and licensed by the CDC. So there's no way for us to independently verify any of that. There's a guy, I think, named Andrew White, who's now doing the independent verification tests. And he's finding exactly what I'm going to tell you, that anytime you do a PCR test, they have to have a template, which basically shows they add in the DNA, like different molecules for the DNA, so it can build a protein. But it, like a dog with a scent, it has to have a template of what it's actually looking for in the test in order to be able to build enough and replicate enough of that protein. So any PCR test, there's going to be a title in that PCR test for what it's looking for. For COVID, it should be looking for the spike protein, or for SARS-CoV-2 sequence or whatever. But what the PCR test is actually really good at doing is collecting DNA. That's what it does.
Yeah.
That's why it was all genetic screens back in the day. It collects your DNA, and it can amplify that so you can look at it, so they can run a sequence. Come to find out, the CDC had a mandate that every CLIA certified lab, which is every lab in the country, if you're going to be a lab, you have to be CLIA certified. That's just part of it. Just like a hospital has to have certification to practice, and a lab tech has to have certification to do the tests. Doctor has to have a license to practice. Same thing for the labs. They all had to send DNA sequences to one of two databases, either NCBI or what is the other one?
It starts with an A.
One other database.
I thought it started with an A, but I'm not sure. I listened to you talking about it. That doesn't matter. A couple of databases.
So ultimately, that is what I believe the PCR test was designed to do. Because if physicians never had to actually run a test to prove that you had it, to prove that you had a virus, why did they need to do the test all the time? Was it just scare tactics? I think it was because they were collecting our DNA and they were sending it to these databases. One of those databases that creates PCR tests is actually the Human Genome Project in China. And our own military has flagged them as being a danger to Americans, because they're collecting all our personal information and our DNA And that's been their job for like 20 years. And they're the biggest biotech company in China. So now they have all of our DNA info.
I wanted to point a couple things out if I could, Karen.
Sure.
So number one, the PCR test checking for COVID is an absolute scam anyway, because if you've gotten the COVID vaccine, you are producing the spike that they are allegedly checking for. So you should come up positive every time if it works correctly. All right. So that's a no-brainer right there. So maybe DNA collection was the goal. I don't know. But I want to talk about this episode of Stargate SG-1. I'm a huge Stargate fan. And one of the it's kind of ironic because in this episode, this group called the Ashen, they're like an alien race. They're, humans or whatever, but they're an alien race. They bump into them, and these guys are wanting to learn how to use the Stargate to go to other worlds. Well, it turns out what these Ashen were doing was a long plan to sterilize different worlds so that they would die through attrition. And then they would take it over and use those worlds for farming to feed their people. And one of the things when they were going to exchange these, and they used a vaccine to do it, by the way. I don't know if I said that, but they used a vaccine to do it that gave you long life and health and all this other stuff, but it sterilized you, which is kind of what we are seeing also with the COVID vaccine. And at the same time, they offered in exchange for this information on how to calibrate their Stargate where they can go further out. They offered in exchange, a biological weapon that you could tailor through DNA for a certain populace. So let's say, you had an enemy that had a certain DNA that's different from your, certain markers in there. You could just drop it everywhere and only the desired people would die. So,
yeah. And
now,
that's what the gene bank in China actually says on its website. That's why it's collecting all our DNA info, so that they can create a drug or a vaccine designed tailored to our individual genome. And
the last piece I want to say is Operation Stargate, because that was the TV show Stargate. And that's exactly what they're doing, is they're targeted drugs for the individual. Well, how do you know it's going to be a drug that helps you and not a bioweapon? That was the thought process I had.
Yeah. Well, of course, go ahead, Ashley.
I wanted you to finish your thought, but just if you want to swing back by to this, I wanted to ask you, because something that I've been really thinking about lately is we talk about the information warfare, right? And there's information coming from in mainstream sources, which we know that we cannot trust, whether that's more conservative leaning Fox or MSNBC or whatever that may be. Then we have kind of this sundowning or sunsetting of mainstream news, definitely during COVID times, right? Like so much distrust. And we really saw the rise of the alternative media, which I actually consider to be Mockingbird 2.0. That yes, they're different, but they're not actually different. But what they're doing is saying things that it sounds a lot better to people like us that actually thought that mainstream media was lying. But what I wanted to ask you is, what did we get wrong? The people that were in the alternative news space during that time, the rubbery clots, the snake venom, the this, that, and the other thing. And I've really been trying to go back through what we heard about nanoparticles, all of these things. And I just wanted to get your take on what is what through that, as far as, and not specifically calling anyone out or anything like that, but just these ideas. What did you hear that maybe you thought was interesting or thought about it, and then later you came to think like the people in the alternative media space are being completely fooled?
And then I have a few other questions that will tie in and kind of move us along to Rockefeller Medicine from where Ashley went. So go right ahead, Zoe.
Okay. Yes. I'm right along on those lines, Jason, for the Stargate thing. And I'm meaning to write an article on that because it is what I found on Stargate. I think Elon and Larry Ellison are all part of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I think that's their role, is to normalize all this AI surveillance and make people think it's for our safety so that they can do exactly what they need to do, because they can't do it without the information. What did we get wrong? So I admit that I was concerned about shedding at the very beginning of the pandemic, because we all heard that if you're around the vaccinated, they're gonna rub stuff off on you and you're gonna get sick and you're gonna be sterile and blah blah blah. I think that was all psyop. I don't think it's provable. I haven't seen any science that actually proves it, other than maybe exchanging body fluids directly, that you can transfer one thing from another person and then have a symptom. I think a lot of that is psychosomatic, and they use the PCR test to prove that, which is questionable. So I think that was a way to keep us divided, to label people as purebloods or not, so that we would hate the people who were vaccinated. And I still have people come up to me and say, well, if they took it, then they deserve what they got. And I'm like, that's your parents and your siblings and your children. How can you say that about another human? Like, I thought we were the people that weren't wishing death on other people. So I think that was part of it. And the reason I say that, it goes back to the PCR test, because what they did in Wuhan, they took a patient that had a pneumonia, and then they took some fluid and then they spliced it all up, and they used AI to come up with a consensus sequence. So they never actually isolated anything. And that is supposed to be their template for the spike. That's not how you do science. That's not how you set up a proper PCR test. And the results of that mean exactly squat. And I actually asked David Rasnick, PhD, who knew Carrie Mullis, who's done a lot of work on PCR, who also agrees that the PCR was a way to collect our DNA. I asked him this very question. I said, so people are, and he does think that when you get the vaccine, your body then makes this spike protein. But he doesn't say that you can use PCR to determine whether you are making the spike, whether you got it by the vaccine or some other means, because that PCR test means exactly squat. It doesn't tell you if you're infected. It doesn't tell you if you can get sick. So it doesn't exactly mean anything. And the fact that they just use AI to come up with a consensus sequence, that's what they do for every variant.
Right.
I even heard Dr. David Martin, who I'm starting to question him as well, but Dr. David Martin said at the very beginning, and I thought this made a lot of sense, and it may even check out to this day. He said, basically, when they're saying there's a variant, all they're doing is they're taking a section of DNA and they're saying, this is the virus section. And then if it's a different variant, then they take a different section of the DNA and they'll say, well, this sequence is the virus. But it doesn't mean you actually have a virus. It's just a way to scare people into thinking that you're sick. So I think we got that part wrong. I think a lot of people are still getting that part wrong. And I think a lot of fear is being spread because of it. I think, and this is another one of maybe controversial topic, but at the very beginning of the pandemic, I don't think people were getting COVID from 5G. I don't think they were getting it from snake venom. And I do think that there really were small cases, not a pandemic, not people dying on the streets, not vast numbers across. I've even covered this with Sasha Ladipova and a guy who used to do neurological research. He calls them neurobugs. So the NIH and the DOD,
James Giordano,
that's the name. They've done a lot of research on chemicals that can be released, or biochemicals, I should say, that can be released in small quantities. And they've even done the numbers and figured out how small of a group of people you actually need to make sick in order to create the kind of fear that we had for the pandemic. And my observations of the cases that we had in the hospital exactly follow that plot, that there was only a small group of people who actually did show up to the hospital with symptoms that were not normal flu-like symptoms. Because there really were people who were, and I knew some of them. I have friends who would not be alive today if we did not go to their house and provide them ivermectin and get them oxygen. So I absolutely believe there was something that was making people sick. I'm not prepared to say it was COVID. Right. I'm not prepared to say it was a new virus. Just like Jason, I can't prove it. I think the evidence was intentionally buried by now. And the idea that they could have put something in the air, water, food, masks to cause us to get sick, to have those sentinel events, which is all that they needed to do, was to have a small group of people get sick that we could point to and go, there really is something, because that person got sick and there's no other explanation than something new. And that's all that they need to do. So I think that there's a lot more of that was going on. I think a lot of the gain of function testing that we're being told and funding that we're being told is actually going to those neurobug type ops and development of those kinds of chemicals. And I think that they're not done yet. I mean, it seems like they're building to something even now. I'm starting to see increases of measles across the globe, really. And there's areas that are starting to mask and lock down again. So it seems like it's building. I think that's the main things. I mean, I've questioned a whole bunch of them, like the nanobots and the graphene. Those are really hard to, because the peer-reviewed science is really all I have to go off of, and the peer-reviewed science is controlled.
Yes.
So it's really hard to sift through. And I mean, I'm really good at figuring out, okay, this study's been paid for, they're co-opted, they're not telling the truth. If they tell you a conclusion right in the beginning of the abstract, that's propaganda. So I've gotten pretty good at reading through scientific papers and sifting through that, but I'm not prepared to say that I have any real clue as to, like, are the clots really nanobots versus some other mechanism? There's definitely new fibrous clots, I can tell you that. I coded different surgeries and interventions on for heart attacks, for strokes, for peripheral, so like in the legs primarily, is where a lot of people had these really, really long clots. And even the surgeons were documenting, I've never had to do this many interventions in one patient before. So the clots are definitely new. I'm not sure what the mechanism behind that is. I don't know if I've heard that it might be like a polymer in the vaccine that then like attracts other cells to it, and then it just builds on itself, and it's like this synthetic material when the embalmers take it out, and you can see that. But it's because it's happening on a molecular level, and I'm not a molecular biologist, I don't really know what the mechanism for that is. I just know it has to do with the vaccine. Absolutely has to, because you're not seeing that in people who aren't, really.
Yes. Well, I'm so glad to get your feedback on that, because that has been something that we talked about. You know, Dr. Jane Ruby was one of the first people to start talking about the fibrous clots, and we had the embalmers that were addressing that. And I always, to me, it did sound possible and legitimate. But all these years later, now I want to make sure that I am practicing my discernment in what was really true about this situation. And I think that, and you have said this, and you've done so much research, but I think that you're still saying, like, there's some things we still don't know. So it's very interesting. And I'm glad to hear your feedback on that and your firsthand experience of these doctors' notes of actually dealing with these fibrous clots from the places that they said they were coming from, because I really have not been able to verify that, because everyone that I knew who was in the medical milieu, they were not really at a place that you could address it with them without being, without going there. Right. Yes. So it's really interesting to get your validation and your take on that specific issue.
Well, the other thing about HIPAA is you can go to jail personally, and you can be fined personally if you give out protected information. So a lot of people think that, now they tell us when you work in a hospital, when you do HIPAA training, you're allowed to talk about generalities, but you can't give out anything that can identify any individual case or any individual person. So you can say, I think there's a lot of cases of clots. But I think HIPAA is a excuse that a lot of people use to not talk about that stuff and pretend that, I could tell you, but I have to kill you, kind of a thing. So they don't talk about it.
I just want to say real quick on the HIPAA. So the HIPAA is designed to hide trends. I'm telling you that right now, because if HIPAA was real, we wouldn't send all of our information to Palantir. I just wanted to say that.
Exactly. That's what I've been saying.
Yeah. And the people are talking about, well, for example, Handy says he's felt huge clots under the skin of his patients, in the ambulance and that type of thing. I wanted to tie in when you were talking about, Ashley said, what did we get wrong? What did we get right? And the discernment is such a strong thing here. And then going back to the Rockefeller medicine about 100 years ago, we had a whole change in our healthcare outlook and system and the control of the narrative. And this is my biology of cancer textbook that it's very, it's several decades old, but even in this textbook, and there was some great actual guests that spoke at this lecture, at this series. One was Linus Pauling, who talked about the importance of vitamin C. Another one was my little brother's oncologist, who really was highly experimental, but stressed positive attitude and having the family included in treatment. So there were some good points and good strategies for this cancer class. But also there's a section that talks about disinformation, the B17 and G. Edward Griffin's book, A World Without Cancer. And this book was written in the 70s, and they're already talking about the disinformation about different cancer treatments and how important it is not to try those things. And
Oh my God. I did a interview with David Raznick again,
I
because he
watched your
studied
double.
cancer for
I
40
watched that.
years.
Yeah.
And yeah, and he talks about how, now I just had a personal observation with my grandpa. He had 2 wives die of cancer. One of them was a rare respiratory kind of a cancer, and one of them was pancreatic cancer. So both very devastating, and both of them took their lives. And he said he would never do chemo or radiation, especially after watching them go through it. He said he would rather just take the cancer and deal with it. And I thought that was a really extreme thing. Like, as a child, to hear your grandpa say that, I thought, well, why wouldn't you do whatever you could to survive? And then come to listen to David Raznick explain, and this is like the exact same thing that happens with antibiotics. So like, even to take the triggering part out of it, that maybe Western medicine might be doing something dangerous to you, let's just set that aside for a second and be logical. So with antibiotics, they know that if they give you too much antibiotics all at once, that they're going to create these superbugs that are going to be resistant to the antibiotics. So they're careful about when and how they give antibiotics. Well, they kind of are careful about how they give chemo, because chemo is a drug that will kill you. And so he stresses that as they give chemo, they're trying to kill you, but not actually like take you to the point of death. They're trying to kill off the cancer cells, but they can't kill all of them. So what they're doing is they're actually allowing the resistant cancer cells that don't respond to the drug to get more powerful and proliferate. And that's actually what is happening to people when they go through chemo and they still die of cancer. But then Western medicine will say, oh, well, the chemo just didn't work and the cancer was just too powerful. And then he said something about surgery, which I had never considered before. He said, so basically cancer is not a genetic disease. He says it's a dysregulation of your immune system disease. And the more chemicals, the more EMF, the more environmental damage you have, the more likely cancer is to get beyond what your immune system can take care of and become a cancer. And he says, when you take a surgery and you remove the tumor, it creates a space for more cells to come in and invade that area. And I know I've heard people say, this was a girl who worked for Blue Cross, so I know she's seen a lot of claims too. And she said, I swear every time they do a surgery on a cancer patient, it's like the cancer spreads. And she swore she thought it was exposing the cancer to oxygen, because she didn't have like an explanation for it. She just knew that every time someone gets a surgery, it seems like it spreads it. And now, like for uterine cancer in particular, they have this device called a macerator. And what it does is it takes the uterus, rips it all up, and sucks it out in little pieces. And you don't get all of it. And so now there's like class action lawsuits that are being brought because cancer was spread in a lot of these poor women who had that procedure.
You know, I've studied cancer for basically all my life because my little brother was diagnosed at age 3 and I was 9 years old. And so it's been a part of my life, you know, all my life. And Jason and I have done a couple shows on cancer. And this is not medical advice, but I came to the conclusion long ago that it is your immune system which will keep it in check, and that we do have most likely many cases, and within throughout our lifetimes, uh, when cells are become dysregulated, and our immune system, a healthy immune system, will take care of that. And so the chemotherapy, of course, is lowering your immune system and taking its place theoretically to kill the cancer cells. But once you compromise your immune system, the remaining cancer cells are going to have a field day, you know. And then it's fairly well known that if it's really not advised generally to get a biopsy, because when you break that, a lot of cancers are encapsulated. So when you break the encapsulation, the membrane, pull it in and put it in, pull a piece out, you're allowing the opportunity for spread. So it's really something to really consider very carefully before you just get a biopsy. Absolutely.
I
Go
would
ahead.
like to mention as well, where you're talking about the lowering of the immune system, Karen. I think that's critical, and I think that that is what the bio shot was designed to do.
Absolutely.
Is when you think about it, if you're telling the body to make something, and now it's been proven, we had the theory earlier on. It's like, when does this thing know when to turn off? Okay, it's producing this spike all throughout your body that's making your immune system go crazy. Well, your immune system can't go forever. It's going to wear out. So we're seeing an associated really high rise in turbo cancers after these shots. Is it because the cells themselves that are making the spike protein become tumorous and start dividing, or is it because our immune system is wiped out? It's tired. You know, it's been at war.
I heard a video of a whistleblower from one of the vaccine manufacturers describe that. It was a video, Max Wang posted it on Substack. And I think I recirculated it on my Substack. And she says that the first shot is designed to reduce your immune system, to take out your white blood cells, which is your first line of your immune system cellularly. It's also in your gut. Your primary immune system is in your gut and your respiratory system. But when it gets to your blood, then it's your white blood cells. So she says the first one takes out your white blood cell count, but it takes about 8 weeks for your marrow to upregulate white blood cells and get it back to your previous level, which is why that's when you are, I think the booster is in like a month, and that's intentional to take your white blood cells down from getting back to its normal level. And then the boosters, they change it to have more of the adjuvants, which then insult your immune system. So basically, it's a calculated assault on your immune system to take your immune system down below a level where it can recoup and it can't fight anything off. And then they added in the SV40, which has been proven even in people who hadn't been vaccinated with this COVID mRNA, whatever. This was long before that.
Right.
Patients who already had cancer, you can still inject SV40 into their skin and make them get more cancer. So that's how cancer producing SV40 is. That's why they use it in the labs to study cancer. So they added fuel to the fire after they get rid of your immune system. Then they add a chemical to make you more likely to get this turbo cancer.
And then you're also using immortal cell lines, which are programmed to stay immortal in the manufacture of a lot of these vaccines and the SV40, and culturing these things. And then we see the rise in autoimmune disease and all the chronic illness in our children from all of these vaccines, which is very similar. It's compromising the immune system, and that's what's happening with children, with all of us who've had flu shots and pneumonia shots throughout the years. My father died, I feel, from his immune system being compromised at a time where his body couldn't tolerate those particular vaccines. So, and Handy just said this is war, and it absolutely is. It's a war against our health and our immune system. Go ahead, Jason.
Zoe, I used to do a show. I may still pick up on it again, but I used to do a show called The Foxhole, aside from this show. And I looked at everything from a military aspect because I was a career military, about attack on our food, attack on this, attack on that, attack on morality, and where they were trying to go with it. So let's just walk it back to the Stargate program where they're going to tailor make a drug or a bioweapon, whichever it may be, for you or for people like you. The first thing you would do, looking at it from a military aspect, if you are going to attack somebody, is soften their defenses. So that theory about lowering your immune system, and Handy had said in there, VAIDS is very real, vaccine-induced AIDS. That would be step one in ensuring that step two was successful. And I just want to throw that in there, Karen. I didn't want to interrupt again.
Oh, no problem.
Very
It would be
profound.
fun to do another show with you. We're already over an hour and a half. I looked at your video about methylene blue, and I have a lot of thoughts about that and how we use our discernment in the alternative world. I have, like I said, I've done shows about what I would do or recommend for cancer, but then we have so much misinformation even in our sphere, in the alt media sphere, and the medical freedom sphere. It's really hard to sift through it all. Would you like to talk a little bit about the Rockefeller medicine system and and just basically how it came into being, or anything you'd like to talk about regarding that and how it changes the way that we see our bodies and our health, our whole health, and what you do to stay healthy? What would you recommend to stay healthy? I think oxidative stress is really a key.
I do think oxidative stress is really a key. I mean, if you look at it, anything that causes oxidative stress is what started the cytokine storm that people were calling COVID-19. That was the real COVID-19, was your immune system. I wouldn't even call it an autoimmune attack. It was more of an allergy kind of response. In fact, I think the worst of COVID cases, they should not have been called sepsis, as they were called. They should have been called SIRS, which is systemic inflammatory reactive syndrome, which is your whole body being inflamed all at once. That's the cytokine storm.
Okay.
And so I think that was like people who had legit COVID, their whole body was inflamed. I think that is one of the main, defining things of real COVID versus flu. And on Rockefeller medicine, I have been calling COVID the Flexner Report 2.0. The Flexner Report it changed medicine in the same way that COVID changed medicine. And how that came about was Rockefeller had just dissolved Standard Oil and become the world's first billionaire. So he was massively influential and powerful. And he had just discovered that petrochemicals, oil, can be turned into drugs. So he had this whole plan to create this, pharmacy empire that he could solely control, because he's the monopoly man. He's the one who inspired the monopoly game because of how he practiced business. He thought that competition is a sin. And so he wanted to get rid of all the holistic practitioners, even though he himself and the Crown of England have used holistic and homeopathic medicine over Western medicine the entire time. That's what Rockefeller used, was holistic and natural medicine. But those people were declared quacks. And any sort of natural medicine that used plant medicine, that used chiropractor, that spiritual healers, all of those things were called quackery, and everything was changed over to allopathic medicine. Any medical school that taught holistic medicine, homeopathy, chiropractor, anything, they were all shut down. Doctors were jailed. They were delicensed. Also at that time, anyone who was Black or female was forbidden from practicing medicine. And that's where we get the idea. Thank you, David Starr Jordan from Stanford. I think he worked at Stanford University, for us having the idea that doctors are all privileged white males. That's where that idea came from. And so ever since that time, holistic practitioners have not had proper medical schools. They've not had proper training, and they have been shunned and sent to the corners of society and basically told, you're not allowed to play in the same sandbox as everybody else. And that same pattern started happening in COVID. Any doctor who wanted to prescribe ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, vitamin C, anything natural for COVID, those people are still being delicensed, censored, shut down, silent. I mean, so you're not allowed to do anything other than Western medicine once again. And this is why I say that it's all controlled, because the insurance companies will not pay for any sort of holistic medicine. You can't get licensed. You can't practice in insurance. You can't practice at a hospital. You can get a naturopathy license, but even naturopaths are looked down upon by the Western medicine system. I can't tell you how many cases I would code as when I was a coder, and someone would come in and say, oh, I have a naturopath. They diagnosed me with this, and I'm on these 3 supplements. And you can tell that the patient like really believed in their naturopath and that their health had come up. And I mean, they'd usually have these massive chronic symptoms or chronic diseases where normally those kinds of patients would be on 10 different kinds of drugs and have all kinds of different surgeries in their medical history. But the ones that went to a naturopath didn't. And the Western doctor that saw that patient would say, I'm not going to listen to whatever diagnosis the naturopath said. I'm going to diagnose you myself. And forget about those supplements. Naturopath doesn't know what they're talking about. I'm going to put you on these. And it'll be a Western medicine pharmacy provided kind of a drug rather than something that comes out of the earth that's just been formulated into pill form so you can take it. So that is the overall prevailing opinion to this day, that you don't know what you're talking about, and it's dangerous and scary and a bad thing to practice natural medicine. But Rockefeller being such a hypocrite that he used it himself, I find that really, really telling.
Yes. And he did the medicine he was promoting, or that was being used, was from petrochemicals, from oil, which is where he made his
exactly. He stood to profit from it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ash.
Yes. So I just wanted to chime in, and I have dogs barking. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say that
I like dogs.
The petrochemical thing is all about greed, because homeopathic natural medicine can't be patented. So that is why they push that away. Ivermectin, all that stuff. You can't use that. Well, there's
and I even find that I totally agree with you. But I also find, like Ashley was asking earlier, the kinds of things that we got wrong, or what's going on in the medical freedom group. Even ivermectin has negative consequences.
Yes.
And hydroxychloroquine, especially, because that brand name is Plaquenil. It's prescribed for people with autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, and those patients couldn't get hydroxychloroquine for a time at the beginning of the pandemic because it was so demonized to prescribe that drug, even though we had been doing it the whole time. It just suddenly became, oh, that drug's bad. And I felt like that was part of a psyop, because those are still Western medicine drugs that are still licensed, that you still have to see a licensed physician to be prescribed those medications. And it is still the pharmacy companies that make those drugs, that make a profit from those drugs. So I felt like that was a way to siphon off part of the group that they knew wasn't going to trust them, but still get us back to the same goal of paying big pharma. Because what you notice is there's other natural things like curcumin and zinc and vitamin C and even oxygen therapy that people have used to get rid of COVID. And there was even like a tea from Africa. And I think the president of Africa was like assassinated after saying, oh, we solved COVID in our country because we have this tea and it's getting
Tasmania.
rid of it.
I think it was Tasmania.
There were about 5 African leaders that pushed
but they
back.
Can't patent those drugs, and they can't make money off them in the same way.
There was a move before COVID. I noticed that, and this was before COVID, that the FDA was trying to move many supplements to being by prescription only. including methyl B vitamins. I take methyl B12. I'm mercury toxic, and that's been a whole. I've had to save myself basically, and there's misinformation that's harmful about that in the mainstream media, doctor, the allopathic medical system, and there's also a lot of very harmful information in the alternative medicine world about mercury toxicity. So I had to kind of sort through it myself, which is why I was aware that things like methyl B12 and other things were some of the like L-lysine and other types of amino acids and supplements and things, aloe vera juice, and that those were trying to be moved to be by prescription only. So there's been a move to take those tools away from us that are those basic building blocks to health, a healthy immune system, and restoring, keeping our balance and restoring our health that come from nature. There's been a move for quite a long time, not just with the allopathic system, but with moving us away from, the food, natural, healthy food, the ability to supplement with a good quality methyl B vitamin, those types of things. So there's really it is a war to move us away from what's healthy and natural and good for us into this system where you don't call us, we'll call you. We'll tell
Exactly.
you, and
the robot will see you now.
yeah, we'll have a pill, and we'll make sure that it can monitor whether you take it or not, and what you're eating, and whether you're leaving your house, and how old you are, and whether you're useful at this point anymore. Ashley, go ahead.
Yes. So that's one of the things too that I wanted to talk about. It may be too much, and I know that you know this already, Zoe. We know it here, and probably our audience does. But the Rockefeller medicine, that was a big part of getting, it's very brave new world, running a smear campaign on midwives who traditionally had done all the birthing here in this country. And people, of course, things went wrong sometimes, but most of the time people were fine, and these women did this. They helped their community. So then we see this transition. So not only with the rise of infertility and everything that comes with that, but then we see women getting Pitocin to induce their pregnancy. They're having emergency cesareans, and now after or at least anecdotally, I heard stories about a hospital in Chapel Hill doing like emergency OB, labor and delivery, and they were having many emergency hysterectomies without the consent of the mother. So this was a big push, and the documentary, The Business of Being Born, actually really opened my eyes to that one facet in the medical community about how we transitioned. And that was really a Rockefeller medicine move. And now we're getting closer and closer, it seems, to this brave new world type of, we've already seen it put out there. It's very Black Mirror, this robot that can, basically be a pod for a baby, growing a baby. So that is something that was on my radar. But then something else that I wanted to ask you about, get your thoughts on, is that so I've been listening to Billy Ray Valentine, and he talks about, okay, so you're told, that you can't trust the medical system, and what happens if you get cancer, right? And we know, like Karen has mentioned it, there definitely are some things, if you wanted to make that decision for yourself, that you could pursue, right? And we've heard in some cases mixed results about that. But I felt like a large part of this is setting that dialectic up, that you don't feel that you necessarily have a good alternative to pursuing what a traditional medical system would prescribe to you if you had a cancer diagnosis. And it's very scary. And this is also purely anecdotal, but I've seen so many people in my life go that route, and all it does is make them deathly ill and sick until their last day, until the last drop, until the last treatment can be administered. Every dollar is milked out of them.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
they've even done studies and found that 90% of the care that you will need in your life is at the last 10% of life. So they know at the end they're going to be milking it.
Yes.
They wait for it.
Yes. And these people, young people, they're getting diagnosis, and they get this vicious treatment all the way until the very end. They don't have the real conversations with them about, it's time it is time to
Mhm.
bring in hospice. They make money on hospice, but it's not the same amount of with these huge medical treatments that they're giving them. And I have even wondered about hospice, right? It's part of the medical
Oh,
know,
yeah.
but we see the benefit in so
My
many
dad
ways.
was a hospice patient, and he died about a year ago.
Yes,
Day after Christmas.
my
And
father-in-law.
I will probably be writing about hospice because it's basically made. It is a
Yeah.
made program.
Right, right.
My,
And oh, sorry, Karen, just really quick, but I just want to
sure,
say,
go ahead.
I can't wait to hear your thoughts on that because it's something that I've been conflicted with because you see people, I've had several people in my life that I was able to help at that time and they were on hospice and there was a lot of benefit there. There's a
Mhm.
lot of benefit, but I'm not so naive or so rigid in my thinking that I don't want to see the other side or the criticisms of that system. But then the other part of this is it's setting up these sides about people, either you try to go your own way or you try to risk it within the medical system. And my grandmother very wisely said this to me many years ago because one of her friends was diagnosed with cancer. They did surgery, they punctured her lung, and my grandmother said, if something like that had happened to me, or if I was facing this today, knowing this, I wouldn't pursue it because she never had another good day after that. Right. So these things are heavy on my mind as far as like what really is the best. And I think that Billy Ray has a point. Do you go, because these people are
I have been
lifted up as
telling
these
people,
experts.
do not take me to the hospital. Even
Yep.
if I'm dying, I would rather die at home. They are not
Yep.
going to help me at all. Do not take me.
Right. And
I
that's
know
very
even my mom
profound.
at one
That's
point
very
said
profound for you to be there.
yeah, I mean, I used to work for these institutions. I used to think that they were supposed to be there to save your life. I used to think that they were supposed to be there to support you through the most precious moments in life, giving birth to your baby, saying goodbye to someone at the end of life. They were supposed to be there to provide those precious moments and support you through those. And then I found they will separate you from your loved ones. They will strap you down. They will silence you. They will put a mask on you. They will give you drugs and intentionally murder your ass while you're in there, which is the most vile, despicable, disgusting thing that I can imagine. And these people were in support of it. I would not let that happen to my father. I would not let that happen to my worst enemy. And then the birth part, I think we need to create, like we had before the Flexner report, an alternative to seeking health. And there's one farm that I volunteer at. You mentioned, Karen, Linus Pauling, and they call it vitamin C babies. So they've studied Linus Pauling and they've studied vitamin C therapy. And they say, if you are a vitamin C mom, so you've taken a sufficient amount of vitamin C, basically maxing out what your body can absorb in a day, that there are less pregnancy complications. And so they have basically a pool, like a hot tub. So it would be like a water birth, and they have a midwife and you can deliver. They call it the birth trauma system if you deliver in a hospital, because it's a traumatic experience. First of all, they're going to shoot you up with drugs. They're going to give you more drugs. They're going to try and vaccinate your baby within a day of it being born. It has a massive amount of aluminum in it. I mean, it is. And now they're trying to push birth control on new moms before they even leave the hospital. They'll ask if you're having a C-section, do you want to be sterilized right now? We could take out your uterus. We could just do a tube tie right now if you want. And that's normal for them to talk about, like, okay, well, you pumped one out. Let's go ahead and stop that before you get out of the hospital. So like that whole is really nefarious. And the only way to really avoid it is to not go to their system. So they're creating a way for people to be able to deliver outside of a hospital and to be able to normalize that. And I think we need to do that for end of life as well.
Absolutely.
If I could have kept my dad home and off the drugs, because at one point we had to call the fire department because there was an incident. And the fire department, the first thing that they do is they check the drugs that the patient is on. So I had to get out boxes and boxes and boxes of drugs and be like, and here's the organizer for what he took today. And here's the 6 pages of prescriptions that he's on. And the guy was joking with me, but he said, you know, it would be easier for me to just document what your dad's not on. And I said, I know. He was joking. I wasn't. And we were actually trying to pull him off of the drugs because at one point he realized, even though he didn't want to be uncomfortable and he thought that the drugs were there to make him comfortable, he was starting to have symptoms from all of the drugs and he didn't know which drug was causing him to have the symptoms. So he wasn't quite clear of mind, but he was picking through the drugs. Like, are you giving me this one that I don't want? And I don't think I'm going to take that one today. And I didn't want that experience for a loved one.
Mhm. Yeah, people in the chat, most people are saying, and I agree, never go to the hospital. And if you do, certainly don't go alone. You have to have an advocate.
You
Do not
absolutely
leave a
do.
loved one in the
At
hospital
all
alone.
times. In fact, I was part of an organization during 2020 and the early part of 2021 when patients were still going to the hospital and they were separating them and giving them the protocol death. And we were working to get people out of the hospital. And we would be following the people while they were in the hospital, their case. We had like a team of nurses and we were all kind of medically oriented people. And there was a chat group specifically for this volunteer organization so we could follow. So we knew how many patients were in different hospitals and who their advocate was. And we would tell them, do not leave your family member there alone for any period of time ever. You get yourself someone to cover you when you leave. And inevitably, someone would have to go home and take a shower or go home and get some food or something. And that is the second that they would put the patient on the vent. Or that's the second that the patient would have a cardiac arrest in the middle of the night. And then their family would never see them again. So do not ever leave a family member in the hospital alone for any reason, period.
I agree. I noticed, or to me, the what I've seen with cancer and people being treated for cancer, and I had a 40-year-old daughter-in-law who died of cancer 2 or 3 years ago, and she had chemo to the 2 or 3 weeks before she died. It was just pathetic. I mean, it was, and I tried to help her with several other modalities, but she was very faithful, but she also was very faithful to the allopathic system, and she had to have that chemo, and she took chemo to the very end. And this is a 40-year-old woman with 4 daughters. And then the hospice system. Hospice wasn't there for her, and my uncle died in hospice, and they weren't there for him. It was a horrible death for him. But then I know other people who have had hospice where it was actually a fairly good experience. So I think it depends on you being educated and asking questions and looking into the hospice. What reputation does it have? What are their methods? What are the laws in your area? What are the wishes of the patient? And making sure that about those things ahead of time. There's a nurse on a hospice nurse on YouTube, and I'm not sure how much she is into the allopathic scene, but she has a lot of good videos about what the stages of dying and what it looks like, what it sounds like. And her name is Hospice Nurse Julie. So if you're going through death, and I tend to be the hospice worker, quote unquote, for my family. I've been there when everybody dies. I'm the one who stays. Everybody else is scared, and I stay. And so I found her videos useful. So Hospice Nurse Julie is her name on YouTube. If you would like to be able to educate yourself and not be quite so scared and apprehensive at those last stages of life and what they look like.
Yeah, because really what your loved one wants is just to know that someone's there and someone cares.
Yes.
Sometimes you can't make them more comfortable. You can't make them happy. You can't, enable them to do things that they can no longer do. But you can be there for them.
It's absolutely a sacred time. To me, it's an honor. It's like the highest honor is to be there when they leave, but also when they come into the world. So I'm not sure where you want to go if you want to wrap things up. I did absolutely want to cover your vigil, your books. I wanted to talk about the censorship you've encountered. Some of my other questions were what you think the ostrich farm, does that tie in with the WHO, the Global Health Initiative, and the controlling everything, controlling the food? But that's just so much. There's so much we could cover with this. So
Karen,
whatever you'd like to cover to wrap things up. Jason, go ahead.
Karen and Zoe both. This has been great. This has been one of the best episodes I think that we've done. The audience seems to just absolutely love it. What do you think about doing a part 2 maybe in a couple weeks? I know Zoe's going to Third Eye, and I wanted you to talk about Third Eye a little bit because the deadline's coming up on that. I've been to 2 of them in Pueblo, but yeah, I had some stuff on cancer. I talked with Zoe a little bit about it. Pets and cancer, basically. I got some really good information, and self-amplifying mRNA has been approved. Just saying, that's a whole nother ball game there when you talk.
I don't vaccinate my pets.
Well,
I don't vaccinate mine anymore. I did in 2020 because I hadn't gone down the rabbit hole and I didn't realize it. I had just gotten divorced. I didn't have anyone to watch my pet, and I realized I couldn't even go to the grocery store without my dog having separation anxiety to the point that I would get a noise complaint at my apartment. So I literally couldn't leave for more than 15 minutes without my dog being by my side. And I couldn't always have him in the car with me where I was going. So I figured I was going to have to board my dog, and they make you get vaccinated before you can board it anywhere. I tried to find somewhere where I wouldn't have to. And I tried to find a way to, like, you can go to feed store and buy vaccines, and then you'll have like the little, like a lot number, and you can make it look like you gave the vaccine even though you didn't. And that was a thing that people used to do. Well, now they've got it to where if you're going to go and have your dog boarded, they'll actually call your vet. They won't even let you submit the paperwork. They will call a vet. And if they can't verify, then you can't board your dog. So I figured there's no way around it. I'm going to have to do it. And I got him fully vaccinated at that time. And that year he came down with bronchitis, and we were in the ER one night. They didn't do anything for him other than give him drugs. The drugs made him sicker, so I had him back in the ER the following day. They took him off one of the drugs and said he's got pneumonia. So they did another x-ray, and he had pneumonia. They're like, he would be admitted as an inpatient if he was a human. So that's how sick he is. And I took him home, and I nursed him back to health. He lost massive amount of weight from it. And then about 3 months later, he went into grand mal seizures, was flipping over on himself. And I took him to the vet again. And I said, do a valley fever test, because we lived in Arizona, and valley fever is like a fungus that you can get. And it happened in the summer when there was a dust storm, which is when the spores fly up, and that's when you can get it. Now, I don't know if the vaccines like reduced his immune system to the point that he could then contract valley fever, because people can get valley fever and pets can get valley fever. So I don't think it was the vaccine itself that did it, but I definitely think that there's a connection between the two, whether there was something in the vaccine that caused valley fever-like symptoms, or for him to go into bronchitis and then develop pneumonia or whatever. But now he has chronic seizures that I have to deal with. And of course, they wanted to put him on benzo drugs or Valium and turn him into a zombie. And I was asking for holistic drugs, which they wouldn't allow me to do. I've put him on CBD, frankincense oil. I've used oregano oil for about a year, which has antifungal properties. And we pretty much gotten rid, like, he doesn't hardly ever have valley fever symptoms anymore. But he still gets the seizures sometimes. And I can get them pretty well reduced if I keep his diet clean and keep his immune system working. So yes, do not vaccinate your pet, and keep in mind that whatever risks there are for humans to get the vaccines, they view animals as guinea pigs. They are the test subjects, and they do not tell the vet, and they do not tell the pet parent, just the same as they don't give you the vaccine insert when you go get a vaccine yourself. They're not going to tell you that with the pet vaccines. They're going to make you get the rabies one. They're going to make you get other ones. If you rent somewhere or anything like that, you have to show that you've vaccinated your pet. And they're not going to tell you that they're moving everything over to mRNA, that the vaccines they give animals are far more potent and far more dangerous than the ones that they concoct for humans. So
I just wanted to add really quick that to get around, if you have somebody that you can trust who can house sit or pet sit for you, that's the way to go, because you're right. You cannot always be home with your pets. Like, you love them so much, but you can't always be there. So if you are lucky enough or make an effort to try to find somebody that you trust to love your animals like you love them and be at your house, that is one way to maybe get around these boarding restrictions, because you're exactly right. They want to require all of this stuff for your pets to have. And I'm with you. Absolutely not interested in any kind of shots for my pets at all. I've made so many mistakes with my pets previously. So I'm trying to do the best that I can now with what I know. And then the other thing that I was going to say is that the dose that 100-pound mastiff would get of a rabies vaccine is the exact same for a 5-pound chihuahua. It is absolutely disgusting. And if you ask them about it, they'll be like, yeah, because whatever. And they come up with some BS reason. But there is no reason that there should not at least be the consideration for dosing for our pets. And then, of course, we know that there are some natural that try to work with the fact of these requirements. Dr. Becker, she does Bark and Whiskers. She's like Mercola's sidekick on the veterinary side. And so they do acknowledge this, but they also know that many state laws make it really difficult for people to get around this. So they try to tell you like how you can minimize damage and, only do every 3 years and this, that, and the other thing, which I think is at least helpful if you're really in a bind. But they talk a lot about titers, that you will have titers after one vaccine shot of rabies, and that you should be able to. And there are some people that are working in different states in order to try to get a titer test to be accepted. But that is one question that I had for you, is that do you ever, because is there really a risk? What is the actual risk for rabies? Does it even work?
There's no risk for rabies. There's none at all. None at all. When I used to work at a vet clinic, and we looked at the numbers of rabies, and it was joked amongst all of us like there's been only one case in the last year of rabies in our state. And I just saw, like, it was probably a couple years ago now, more fear mongering over rabies on the rise. And do you know how many cases they had in the whole country? 10 total.
You know what they do though is when the hat comes off or the mask comes off and you start saying, wait, there's not that many cases of this, they turn around then and point to, that's because we vaccinate.
Right.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. That's what they did with polio too. But you look at the numbers, and the numbers came down before the vaccine came out. So we can probably just.
Well, I remember when the movie Cujo came out. Remember that back in, I think it was the 80s. I didn't even know what rabies was. I never heard of it. And they made that movie was terrifying.
Old Yeller. Old Yeller. I cry every time when the dog
devastating. It's devastating.
Rabies.
Yes, and you never want to be the cause of something bad happening to your pet, and it's just so frustrating that you can't get good information. Even if you try to pursue naturopathic vets, there's not the same level of information out there as there is for us people. And then we have all these other nuances. Like some people are like, yeah, you can give them a little bit of garlic. And then some people are like, never, no garlic, no onions under any circumstances, and no effing grapes either. So you're like, okay, I'm just like, it just seems so strict.
I've taken up doing like holistic veterinary services on the side. I've had probably like 5 or 6 clients now, and I haven't done it professionally because the first thing I run into is I say, well, these are the things, because I did it for my dog. So I'm like, if I can make it so I didn't have to take my dog to the vet when he broke his leg and he was walking again afterwards, if I can heal that and I can heal valley fever, then I can probably help other people. But the first thing that happens is they tell me the problem. And then I'm like, okay, well, change your perspective on how Western medicine works. There is not like a one ill, one pill deal. I have to ask a lot more questions. I have to find out what you're feeding, what's your lifestyle, get a lot more information. And then we're going to deal with this. Like, we're going to treat the whole pet, not just the symptoms. And then I say, well, we're going to need a couple of things. And these are the things. And they don't know where to get those things. So I really need like an apothecary first, so that I can then provide that to my clients So they're not just like, because I end up losing them after about 5 or 6 texts back and forth. Well, you're going to need to buy this. Well, where do you buy this? Send them a link. And they're like, okay, when I get it. And then by the time they get everything together, they're already like, I don't even know what to do. I'll just go with Western medicine. So I need to make it easier for them before I can really do that. But I hear you. There's so much misinformation about veterinary health, especially in the natural realm. It's really overwhelming. And some of it's dangerous, terrible information.
Absolutely.
And some of it is still pro-vaccine for some reason.
Yes.
Like there's this guy who does veterinary secrets, and I've reached out to him multiple times. He's a big YouTube veterinarian.
Dr. Andrew Jones.
I've reached out to him on the virus thing. I've reached out to him on vaccines, and he will not engage with me. So
his recipe for ear infections works, though. I used his recipe, and it cured my dog's ear infections. And I make my dog's own food, and I've actually learned a lot from Dr. Jones. But yes, he is still pro-vaccine to some degree.
I've done that too. And I was going to say, actually, what they taught me when I worked in a vet clinic about giving vaccines, this is really interesting. And I shared this with Sasha Ladipova because she made a comment on her Substack once, and this got like recirculated a whole bunch. So when they train vets on how to give vaccines, they usually give 4 at once, whether it's a dog or a cat. And there's a certain leg that they give each shot in. And they say that because when the animal gets a tumor, they can't actually just remove the tumor. They have to amputate. So they know which vaccine goes in which arm. So they know which vaccine is causing the tumor to figure out which one maybe they don't want to give in the future. But see, they never actually share that information.
Right. And they don't even want to admit it to themselves. And there's a specific vaccine that cats get that they started putting in the tail because it was easier to amputate, because there were so many amputations associated with that.
And heaven forbid they stop giving that vaccine.
It is infuriating.
Well, one of the things I found, I had a cat with congenital kidney disease, and the cat died at 6.5 years old. And it was a horrible death because it was kidney failure. So it's same thing that all the poor patients that suffered with remdesivir had. Okay. And what I found was, and this was when I started questioning vaccines for pets. Every vaccine that they give to cats, they use kidney tissue to grow the vaccine, or, to make the vaccine. So kidney tissue is in it. So it's sort of like pathogenic priming for a cat to then reject any protein that came from the vaccine. And therefore it like targets their immune system to target kidney cells. And that's why there's so many kidney problems in cats. You can ask any vet, you can just Google it. And one of the number one health problems in cats is urinary, primarily from kidney issues. Which
and I think dry food is also supposed. What are your thoughts on that? Because they definitely say that dry food is a big contributor, like kibble.
Dry food is terrible. I pretty much describe it as you're giving your pet a barbecue briquette, like a coal barbecue briquette, and it tastes that awful for your pet. So the only way they can get your pet to actually eat these barbecue briquettes, because basically what they do is they take the meat, they put it in a vat, they overcook it, and it reduces down the protein and the nutrient value to like next to nothing. So what comes out doesn't taste very good.
I got something to say on that as well.
So they add in, and they don't have to put this on the label because of the labeling restrictions. So they add in entrails that have been like dehydrated and turned into like a powder. And so that's that powdery substance that you see on top of the kibbles. That's why they all have this oily kind of powder on it. That is the entrail powder. That's what makes it palatable to your pet. It's the only reason that your pet will eat the kibble. And that's why your pet gets addicted to kibble, because it likes that taste. So it's like taking a barbecue briquette, putting barbecue sauce on it so it tastes good. Is basically kibble. So I don't feed my dog kibble. My cats, I can never get them off of it. But I primarily give them canned, and I make it myself if I can. I know a lot of vets will tell you you're a horrible, horrible person if you make your own pet food. But that's only if you don't know the right nutrients to put in it.
My
I wanted to
cats
talk
are
about
addicted
that.
to kibble also, but I make sure they have wet food too. But I do make my dog food.
So I wanted to talk about that with the dry food because I worked at a cereal factory, not for very long because it was horrible wages, horrible hours, and horrible work conditions. But when we would make the cereal, it's all fillers. It's all just fillers, right? And then the nutrients that you see on the label, they have to add those, and they're all synthetic. They're not real. And we were talking about this in the chat. Synthetic vitamins do not absorb into the body very well. Most of it just passes out. It needs to be all natural to absorb properly, and it has to be water or fat soluble. So you have to eat properly with it as well. We all know this. This is kind of simple stuff. But when I found out we were putting the synthetic vitamins in there, and then they would take a batch to the lab and test it, and if it didn't test, like because of the FDA and stuff, our labels, it has to fall within a certain amount of what is on the label. If it was off, then all that would go into these big, huge cardboard boxes and later be ground up and then added to dry dog food. So even if they tell you that this has this nutrients or whatever in this dog food, it's really mostly filler, and none of those nutrients are going to be absorbed because of the nature of the way they make it. Now, I don't know if that's if they made a dog food that was 100% of our rejected cereal, or if it was mixed in. I'm not sure. I just know that if it claims to have nutrients, don't expect your dog to absorb those. You're just going to make them fat. A lot of fillers, no nutrients. So
also, if it says meat byproducts can be ground up dead animals that have been euthanized from a vet. That does go in pet
that's
food.
disgusting.
Yeah, we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
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 So you want to talk about your book or your how
I was
we can
gonna
help
say,
you out, or
well, yeah, I'll talk about where to get the book, and then I brought up the video for the vigil, or you can just
wonderful.
play it there from the website if you like, whichever's easier. So I've been. Oh, go ahead. So that's a little video promo that I came up with. That is my voice, and shout out to number 6 from the TMP crew who did the guitar and bass on that. And I did that because there was a girl who used to sing that song who died suddenly in my family, and she had a beautiful voice. And I thought, well, no one else is going to hear it, but my voice is pretty similar, so maybe I can put the two together. And I thought it was a powerful song. If you look at the lyrics to that song, and I'm not a huge Fall Out Boy fan, I'm way more of a metalhead than that, but the lyrics are very, I mean, it was eerie when she sang it. She didn't know that that was going to happen, but I mean, just looking at the lyrics, it's so fitting. So what we're going to do is we're going to live stream the event from the streets of the Gates Foundation on Valentine's Day. And what we're going to do is we're taking names of hospital protocol victims and vaccine injuries. Could be any vaccine. Doesn't have to be the COVID-19 vaccine. It could be any vaccine at any point in time. You don't even have to know for sure. That's the beauty of this. Like when you went on the Vax bus, you had to tell a story. You had to be on screen. You don't have to be on screen for this. You don't have to pay anything. All you have to do is submit a name, and we will go and light a candle for your lost loved one. And we're going to live stream the event on Valentine's Day. So we'll have video feeds going. It'll probably be live streamed to my website. So if anyone in the crowd has names that you'd like to submit, go ahead and submit those. I've already gotten some so far. So they're already coming in. I'm going to get more information and put that on the website if people want to show up in person. It is going to be on Valentine's Day, so it's going to be cold. It's I think it's on a weekend, but it's going to be in the evening, and we're not like the Seattle crew doesn't really like to come out. They like to stay inside warm in their house. But we'll probably have like some hot cider, hot chocolate available for people. We're trying to find a way to have a phone number where people can call in and give us some of their stories, because I gave it an option. If you want to tell me something, if you want to tell us, the crew that's planning this, Tim Lastly, who has been protesting at the Gates Foundation for years now, is helping me do this, as well as one of the co-hosts from his podcast, Lisa Marie, who does Mostly Diplomatic. So she's also going to be helping us, and we'll be there on site taking video and hopefully taking phone calls of people who would like to share their story. Although that's not necessary. All you have to do is submit a name. If you don't want to get into the details, you don't have to. That's the beauty of it. It's all voluntary and it doesn't cost you anything. We're not asking for donations. We are going to cover the cost of it, because we didn't want this to appear like a grift. That we thought that's the first thing people are going to say is, oh, you're trying to use tragedy to make money. We're not. We just want to find a banner that people can actually unite under, something that's not so divisive. But I also thought that it would be really powerful to show people the actual consequence of what we just lived through. And I think seeing physical representations like Jason, you might relate to this. So I went to, when I was like a preteen, I went to France and I went to the Normandy beaches, the D-Day beaches. And I saw the grave markers and I saw the cliff that those people had to climb up. And the graves go on and on and on for miles. And of course, they have this patriotic music playing over the bells. And it's just, it's somber and it's powerful. And I just thought, you know, if like every single one of those markers was like a candle for a lost loved one, that would be like a physical representation. So people who might be in denial, who didn't see what happened behind the hospital doors, who don't know what's going on with vaccines, they might see just a little clip of all these lights and realize, oh my God, something really huge happened.
So that would never happen, Zoe. And there's a question on screen for you from our co-founder, Angry Tiger, who's not hosting.
No, if it's just an injury, they don't have to be dead. We talked about that in the team. So yeah, it could be if their life is changed in some way, you can still submit a name. Yeah.
But the luminary ceremonies are really beautiful. I've seen them before, and it's a beautiful idea you have.
I wanted to point something out, and I have a personal experience with this. I've seen it happen firsthand. So when you talk about war memorials and the graves and the, you know, all that stuff, war makes money. Okay. War makes money. They want more war. They don't want to eliminate war. So they're going to glorify and, you know, have these monuments to people. And, you know, we're going to go and take care of it. We can do it. But I'll share an experience in Colorado when I was stationed at Fort Carson. There was a church out on kind of a main road. There was a Walmart and some other stuff along there. So a lot of traffic on this road. And this church, every time there was an abortion in the city, would put a white cross out in front of their yard. And they did exactly what you're talking about. They had white crosses so people could visually see how many babies were being killed in Colorado Springs in the abortion clinics, right? Or Planned Parenthood or wherever they happened. And people were so offended by that, and the city was offended by that, they actually sued them and made them take all those crosses down. So because there's money in abortion, right? There's money in pharmaceuticals. If we were to point out and have a visual of this is how many people have been vaccine injured or even killed, that would maybe take away from their money. So that's where the difference lies between your, you know, your military honoring and then doing the same thing. They'll never let it happen. I watched it be pulled down in real time in Colorado.
Oh, I'm sure that they're going to try. Yeah. Tim hasn't been in the military, but he has that kind of mindset, and that's kind of how we're going into this. I mean, I didn't even want to announce it. I just wanted to say, give me the names by January 31st, and then you guys won't know anything until it happens, is what I wanted to do. But I guess we couldn't keep the secret. He wanted to invite people and do crowd control. And I'm like, okay, well, if you want to do that, but I really think it's going to make it so they're going to mess with us. So we're completely expecting them to mess with us. We're expecting geoengineering. We're going to use LED lights, even though I'd rather use real fire, like real tea lights, because it's wax, it's biodegradable, blah, blah, blah. But someone will kick over a bag and they'll say, we're trying to start a fire. And every time Tim goes down there, he's careful to be nonviolent. Like, he's even dispersed Antifa and BLM protests before with his nonviolent methods. So he's familiar with what they're going to try and do, who they're going to try and send out to screw with us. And usually all he does is like write in chalk around the Gates Foundation. So like, he knows the exact, like, you're not allowed to walk past a certain line because that's their property line versus what's public. So I'm sure they will try, but I'm still hoping we can pull it off. I guess we'll see. If they don't let us pull it off, that'll be pretty telling too.
Real quick,
come up with a plan B, I'll bet.
Real quick, Karen, I just want to let Zoe know we had M. Sellers in the chat says he supports this. Can you give another reminder later, please? I don't know if that means if it's on your show or.
Well, we can do that too. I would love to support the effort and announce it. I mean, we have a few months to go, so we'll definitely need reminders.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then what about
I'll probably be recirculating that as much as possible. I'll be sending out reminders. Hey, I don't have enough names yet. Come on, let's get this. So yeah, you'll probably be hearing more from me on that. Sorry.
I wish I could write the names on the bags with you, but I'm in California, but I would love to be able to do that. Okay, so do you want to share your website and how to get a copy of your book?
Yes, so I have been incredibly censored. In fact, the bank just shut me down. So the only place to get my book right now, I'm actually going to have to file a criminal complaint with probably the Department of Justice over being debanked at this point. I just got a blanket denial yesterday for being a dangerous business. So this just over the last week, since last Saturday, 2 different banks have shut me down. So I cannot actually sell books on my website. I've pulled it off Amazon because Amazon won't pay me. I've pulled it off all the ebook distributors, Lulu Press, Smashwords, all the ones that can go international because they won't pay me. Wow. I've been fighting for a year to get paid by 2 different platforms. So the only place to go and get a print copy right now is to go to eBay. And yeah, I'm working on the payment processor part for the website right now. So sorry, I can't take your money. The bank won't let me.
Wow.
The ebook, I can email it to people, but I can't actually sell it right now. And the audiobook should be coming out next week. So
maybe you could try doing a workaround. If you could do like a buy me a coffee or Subscribe Star or something where people can leave a tip. They won't let you.
Subscribe Star. I looked into the fine print on that. I don't think I'm willing to do what they want.
Yeah.
Stripe has shut me down, and that's a lot of the buy me a coffee kind of things are handled by Stripe.
Substack.
I also can't use PayPal.
Substack.
Yeah, I actually do get money by Substack, and it is handled by Stripe, which is really weird because the first day that I launched my book, Give, Send, Go, which also uses Stripe as their handler, shut me down. And I found out it wasn't a Give, Send, Go policy. It was a Stripe policy, but I had a different account for that with Stripe versus Substack for some reason. So they haven't shut me down yet, but when they figure it out, I'm sure they will. So Substack is a limited hangout for now, but I just turned subscriptions back on because that's the only way that I'm able to get any sort of financial support right now. So just today I released an interview with Etienne de la Boetie Squared on eugenics. He does the COVID-19 timeline. And so we kind of collabed on that. And then I'm going to have my chapter 6 come out, and that I've been doing a 1 chapter at a time release of my book on Substack for paid subscribers only. So chapter 6, which is the one that covers eugenics, and it's a doozy. It's going to be more than an hour listening time just for that. Yeah, that one with Etienne just came out. So you can very soon get the next chapter on Substack. And that's going to be my only way to really sell and circulate the book for now until I can figure out the payment processor thing. And I'm working on that. It'll probably be a week or two until I can get that taken care of. And I had to cancel going to Third Eye because the audiobook is not done yet and because I've been shut out of the bank. So it's going to cost me far more than I'm going to be able to make going on that trip, which was dicey to begin with. So I'm sorry, I'm so censored. I can't even sell my own book.
I think this is a good example that we need to heed your experience here, because this is what's coming with the programmable money, CBDC, stable coin, however you want to, whichever way you go, even that this is where we're headed. We have a reputation score now on X, so I commend you for really fighting the good fight, being so courageous and so persistent. God bless you.
Well, one thing to think about as well is they're debanking people and shadow banning people, canceling people based off of what they've done that they perceive to be against the narrative or whatever.
Yes.
But what Zoe was talking about earlier with the, anticipating behavior, you may be punished for something you haven't done in the future just because you fit a certain profile. And that's really, this is Minority Report kind of stuff. But it's not just going to cover like major crimes. It's going to cover thought crime.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. They've given me policies and it's saying I'm an unsupported business. And all they can say is like, if you're a business that's doing something illegal, well, I'm not doing anything illegal, especially not in this country. I know in the UK and Australia, they've definitely made thought crimes a crime. So that may be what they're trying to get me under.
I want to mention something as well. I brought this up to Guard maybe 6 months ago. I went through and looked at our extradition treaties that we have with various nations, some of them tiny, tiny nations. And what they've already passed, some of these nations have passed hate speech laws online. So it's not that much of a reach for our government to say they want to get rid of us. We violated something over in Zimbabwe or wherever on their Twitter, and they're requesting us to be extradited for prosecution. Now they don't have to get rid of our First Amendment. They can use a public nation partnership, okay,
And didn't the Netherlands get Gates on that? And so he got summoned to go to their court, even though he was like, it wasn't me, I didn't do it. And the court in Netherlands was like, no, Gates, you're on the hook for this and you do need to testify. So if you don't show up, you'll be considered in contempt of court.
I don't know about that story, but I have heard people reference it. But I mean, it's really easy. If the government wants you, if our government wants you gone, all they got to do is use that third party nation to say, hey, get them on this thing, and then we'll go arrest them and extradite them. And then, so it's extrajudicial. It works. It's a work around the First Amendment. So
that's horrifying. I just thought of one other way people can support me. I did just get a UPS box. I moved over the last month. So you can send me paper cash or checks if you write me. And I tried to enable that on my website, but I haven't tested it yet because all this is just happening over the last few days. But if you go to the website, I did try and enable a cash or check option. If that doesn't work, then you can use the contact page and contact me. And I do think I get those emails. I'll have to double check because I have Proton Mail. It doesn't like to share and send things. But you can use that and write to that P.O. box. And if I get a letter that says, send me a book, I've done that many times before. And if you send me the $20 for the book or the 25 to cover shipping, then I'll go ahead and ship you out a book, even if I can't do the payment processing through the website. So I do take paper untraceable.
Great. Great. I was wondering if checks worked for you. You know, Proton Mail is in Switzerland, and I've heard that they're I don't know if it's the EU or who it is insisting that Proton Mail put a back door in. And so Proton Mail says they're going to leave, but where are they going to go? There is
I've heard that too. Yeah. I don't think there's any email that's actually secure. Like I've tried to find all the encrypted ones, all the private ones, and there's ones that are better than others. Proton Mail is like in the top 5, I guess, but it's not the best. And there's definitely been privacy issues with it. So yeah, none of them are perfect, really.
Okay. Are we ready to wrap it up and call out the chat?
Yeah, let me go ahead and put on screen. I had it on the ticker there. I just want to show Zoe is over on Twix. I call it Twix. It's Twitter left, Twitter right, right? At Zoe underscore TKMC, which is the medical what's it? The kill medical
Thrill
cult.
Kill Medical
Kill
Cult.
medical
Yeah.
cult.
Yeah, so you can find her on Twitter over there. Also, you have 2 Rumble channels. I definitely wanted to point this out, the 2, because you do have 2 of them. You've got just Thrill Kill Medical Cult over on Rumble, and then you have the same thing with Zoe tacked on the end of it. And
Yeah, the one with Zoe is the main one. That's where I have all my videos.
Yeah.
And you've got some great new videos there. I noticed clips you posted about the Rockefeller medicine system.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
somebody was
those are
mentioning
clips I covered in the article that I released today, as well as chapter 6, which is going to be coming out this week.
All right,
Oh,
well,
you're
that's
in
all I
Vax
had. I
3
wanted to
also. No, sorry, Vax 3. Brandon mentioned Vax 1. There's Vax 1, Vax 2, and Vax 3, which is the story of the COVID death protocols and the.
I was featured in Vax 3 quite a bit, actually, too.
Wonderful.
Yeah, Vax 3 authorized to kill, and it's about the hospital protocols.
It's great. It's tough. It's tough to watch, but it's to me it's required viewing. Go ahead, Jason.
All right, I'm going to try to get through these shout outs at warp speed. I know we're way long.
Prepare ship for light speed. No, light speed is too slow. Light speed too slow? Yes, we're going to have to go right to ludicrous speed.
All right, at ludicrous speed. First out, we had Big Ron. What's going on, Big Ron? We've been seeing you week after week. We appreciate the support. Spirit of the Ages in there. LTO, what's up? Brandon Bennett. Raz 23. Raz has been coming on regularly. Melanie, we're continually praying for you. And we had iHandy had so many great comments.
Yes,
we couldn't get to them all, but iHandy is kind of like still doing what you did, Zoe, as far as he's still in the position. And I just once again want to say I truly appreciate the gravity of the situation that you took on with putting yourself at risk. I did that in the Army, where I came out publicly, was hoping I didn't get too much notoriety because I was so close to retirement. And I don't know if what I did was right or not, being in the military, to come out but I try to keep it safe. But anyway, it takes a lot of courage when you don't know what the future holds and what repercussions you're going to have. So just hats off to you for being the watcher on the wall. And I feel that if we're put in that position and we don't do it, then we're culpable as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. But I'll keep going because our warp speed just went back down to, cruise speed. I'm Marty's in there. What's going on? I'm Marty. Death to Tyrants. Providence Wins. Nostradamus. Bronx Stomper. Talmud Terry. Billy Ray Valentine was in there, host of America Unplugged. He was in there for a while. Steven 94. Narrow Way, Narrow Gate. We know him as Levi. End Imperialism. That's Anna. I met Anna at the the Third Eye Carnival in Pueblo this past year, so it was cool. Doc Spoiler is not the Doc that the troll Doc. This is a different Doc. I accidentally banned Doc Spoiler and had to unban him because I thought it was him trying to sneak in, but he's going to be coming on soon. We haven't figured that out yet, but Doc Spoiler has a show. Hit me up if you want to know what his show is. He does like a coffee time thing. It's pretty cool. M Sellers is in there.
Wait. Happy birthday today to our friend Doc Spoiler. He's 29 and holding indefinitely.
29 forever in perpetuity.
Yes. Happy birthday, Doc.
Yes. Ricky said he gave his mom lost 3 cats to flea and tick repellent. So I'm so sorry, Ricky. Please be careful about how the chemicals that you put on your pets. Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
All right, so we had Skunk Hollow Rose Gardens has his own channel. He does planting flowers and stuff and kind of films that.
That's wonderful.
We know him also as Michelle Obama, and that's his old handle until he had to redo the account. Angry Tiger, again, he was co-founder of the show. He helps out still with the show, and he has his own Tiger's Den. Was it 8:30 on Wednesdays? On Rumble. So Denver Attaway's in there. He's one of our great techie researchers. He comes on the show a lot. I'd love to see you there, Denver. That's awesome. Sherry M2, Hemp Car. You know what? They actually made hempcrete, and they made cars with it, and it was stronger and more durable than thick steel. So hemp car is a good name because it's something we should have today. Gonzo Johnny's up in there. What's going on? Sylvia 19, Barry Dutton, Ricky from Anything Is Possible. He was on last week with us. Great episode, brother. I loved it. Foggy's in there, and a dinga ate my baby is in there. Let me know if I missed anybody, Ashley, because it doesn't, if I'm in this window, it doesn't seem to populate. But before you do that, she's producing me again. She said, make sure to tell people to like, subscribe, share, and hit the notification bell. And you can donate on the show on Rumble. We also have a link on our website, thenightsofthestorm.com, if you wanted to donate. We don't look to this as our income, but if you feel so inclined, it does help if we need to upgrade equipment and stuff like that. So,
and shout out to Robin Lee, who watches later, and Melanie, who watches later, and Ann Christ, who always watches later. And we appreciate you ladies, all three of you, so very much. And prayers for Cecilia and her mom.
Yeah, and one last thing I didn't mention, I failed to neglect the other platforms, but nobody left any comments that we can see here in StreamYard over on Twix, but we had we'll have 17 watching now. I think we had more earlier. And the Substack, this is our second week only live streaming to Substack. We had, when I checked in, it peaked that we had 10 watching live there, which is kind of cool because I haven't really advertised that. So that's pretty neat. Okay, back to you, Karen.
Well, let's call out Ashley where we can find Ashley.
Thank you very much. You can find me over at Twitter under my Think Change Repeat handle, whatever. And you can find, send me an email at thinkchangerepeat@gmail.com. Definitely you can find me on the Union of the Unknowns, although we haven't been very active. So just email me.
Awesome. Okay, Jason, final thoughts?
I just want to thank Zoe again. I would really love to do a part 2 because I had the pet vax thing is real important to me, more than just because we love our pets, but also because they haven't approved self-amplifying. They approved self-amplifying in Japan against the people's will.
Yeah, they're already doing clinical trials in America too. So
yeah, but if they can't get it approved for people, they will get it approved for the pets, and that's what concerns me, is slipping it in the back door. So I do want to cover this material, and I definitely want to cover it with you here because we talked about a little offline about cancer rates skyrocketing. I have graphs that show that cancer was on a massive decline before the COVID vaccine came out, and now we are on a super spike. And if they can't get this crap in us by direct injection, by food, by aerosol, they're going to get it through our pets. I mean, and the pet is a whole different process of getting, approved. So that's one thing. And I even have information that shows that these diseases that they're vaccinating against, it's only domesticated pets, but the wild creatures don't have the same diseases. So why would your domesticated ones, which live in a healthier, cleaner environment, eating better food, why would they be getting sick, or are they getting sick? Is it their vaccinations that are making them sick? These are the things I want to talk about. So hopefully we can do a part 2 at some point.
It would be great to get handy on with Zoe too. Okay, Zoe, it was just so wonderful to have you. I learned a lot and I really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit. I know the chatters just got a lot out of it, and I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to spend this time with you. And thank you so much for your courage and continuing to move forward, and anything we can do to help you, let us know. And so would you like to share any final thoughts?
I just want to thank you for allowing me the time, for inviting me. I'm more than happy to come back and have the pet conversation. It's obviously something I'm really passionate about, and I think it's something people do need to know about. So be happy to come back and talk to you guys again. And I'm just keep doing the great work that you're doing, and happy to be part of it.
Thank you so much, Zoe. It was great meeting you. Absolutely love this conversation. Thanks.
And I will be on Franco's show this week, Angry Tiger's Den, talking about something controversial.
I have the scoop, but my lips are sealed.
Yes, Ashley knows. So I'm hoping that many of you will join us for Angry Tiger's Den this week, Wednesday at 5:30 Pacific and 8:30 Eastern. And with that, as Jason always says, keep your armor tight and your I'm not
Sword
sure.
sharp and your armor tight.
Okay, and everybody have a great week and take care of yourselves and those around you. God bless.
You, my friend, 'cause I know you'll be back again and again and again.